I'm moving in with my parents today. If you don't like it, we can divorce and you can leave. Ryan stood defiantly, with a smug look on his face as he looked at me. Then you're fired and can leave the company. I confronted Ryan with my true feelings. I sighed softly and looked at Ryan with cold eyes. Ryan, seeing my gaze, tensed up visibly. Anxiety spread across his face. My name is Kelly, 44 years old. I run a company that manufactures vehicles and parts for transportation. The company was founded by my grandfather, making me the third generation. It's a family-run business. Originally, I had no intention of taking over the company and wanted to lead a normal life. I wasn't particularly good at school and planned to find a job at a general company after graduating. In fact, I landed a job at an IT company. However, when I was 26, my parents died in an unexpected accident. I have an older brother who loves research and is always holed up in his graduate lab. My father left a will stating that I was to become the next president of the company. After that, it felt like I was on a roller coaster. I quit my current job and joined my father's company. The role of president was temporarily filled by the executive vice president, and I worked hard to learn the job. I worked tirelessly, sparing no moment even for sleep, to learn everything about the products we made and how to manage the business. At first, people treated me delicately, as if I were a delicate flower, but gradually they opened up to me. Gradually, I found the work interesting and became president at the age of 40. I've lived for my work, dedicating my life to the company. As everyone around me got married, I didn't have a single boyfriend. I always prioritized work over leisure. I traveled domestically and internationally for the company, so much so that I hardly remember holidays like Christmas or Thanksgiving. Because of this, my relatives started to nag me about finding a successor. Every time I met relatives at gatherings, they would insensitively tell me to hurry up or I won't be able to have children. Aren't you lonely? Some would ask. I knew arguing would only bring more nagging. So I just smiled wryly and left the conversation quickly. Thanks to dedicating my life to the company, our performance steadily improved. Incorporating IT played a big part in this. I started to have a bit more free time and could enjoy my leisure time. That's when I met Ryan, and we met through bowling. A client recommended it, and I took it up lightly, finding it suited my personality and got quite into it. I even bought my own ball and shoes and started participating in tournaments. Ryan was someone I frequently saw at the bowling alley. He was fun to talk to, taught me many things I didn't know, and we even entered tournaments as a pair. After going out to eat several times, Ryan confessed his feelings on one of those occasions, and we started dating. Ryan is the same age as me, but often looks younger, sometimes even in his 20s. I've often been mistaken for his older sister. You probably think I'm unreliable, he would say, looking embarrassed every time. Ryan has many hobbies. From baseball to soccer and golf, he not only likes watching sports but also playing them. Influenced by him, I took up golf. It wasn't just sports, he also took me to concerts and theaters. Ryan introduced me to a world I never knew, and I became completely captivated by him. The time I spent with Ryan was very stimulating and fun for me. My first boyfriend at 44. It wouldn't be strange for me to feel elated. Amidst these light-hearted days, Ryan suddenly said something unexpected. Would you meet my parents? I was at a loss for words at his sudden request. If I'm gonna marry, it's gonna be you, Kelly. I want to introduce you to my parents. It has been about 2 months since we officially started dating. It felt a bit early, but I wasn't young anymore. I wasn't without my anxieties. But I was also happy. I had no intention of refusing. A week later, we visited Ryan's family home. The house was neatly arranged, with a faintly pleasant smell. In the living room, Ryan's dad and mom welcomed us. Ryan's mom had an elegant air about her, with her hair dyed a beautiful shade of purple. My son is lucky to be dating someone as adorable as you, she said with a beaming smile. You're truly a wonderful young lady. Receiving such praise made me feel a tickle of unease on my back. Ryan's parents continued to shower me with compliments until I blushed. Ryan, sitting beside me, looked proud. Right? Finding someone like her at 44 is a real catch. Ryan said with a laugh, but I felt a bit uncomfortable with his wording. A sense of unease began to spread in my chest. But Ryan and his parents were all smiles, making me think that getting along with such lovely in-laws after marriage would be possible. The anxiety I felt earlier vanished. However, I noticed Ryan calling his parents mommy and daddy. I used to call my parents mommy and daddy too, but is it common for adult men to do the same? It seems rare. Perhaps I'm just out of touch with societal norms. Having lost my parents early and being focused on work, I admit I'm not well-versed in social conventions. I decided not to dwell on it, assuming it's just me being unconventional. Surely, Ryan must have a good relationship with his parents. Ryan often praised his mother, which is usually a good thing. However, when we were talking about cooking, Ryan made a comment that felt off. Mommy's meatloaf is the best in the world. He even slightly belittled the meat and potatoes I made. Kelly's meatloaf just isn't as good as Mommy's. Hearing this, I couldn't manage a smile. Perfect, you should get the recipe from her, Ryan said in a tone different from usual. Why was he being so authoritative? Unaware of my ambiguous expression, he exchanged smiles with his mother. Ryan's mother started writing down the meat and potatoes recipe. With this, Kelly, you can make something similar to Mommy's. I was unsure whether to be happy or not. My expression turned into the vague smile I reserve for relatives. As the evening grew darker and it was time to leave, the conversation turned to marriage. I'd marry you right now if I could. It'd make life easier, especially since freelancing doesn't pay much, Ryan said, shocking me. What? Freelancer? My eyes widened. Ryan had said he worked in sales. I hadn't told him about my job either. I just worked at a company making parts. I was embarrassed to say I was the CEO, but I had no idea Ryan was a freelancer. Stunned, Ryan snapped at me. You thought just because he's 44, right? There's a deep reason behind it. Apparently, Ryan's mother has always been frail and sickly. Moreover, 2 years ago, his father became seriously ill and needed care. Ryan, who was working in sales at a printing company, quit his job to take care of his father and became a freelancer to manage his time for caregiving. It's tough on Mommy alone. I just wanted to be there for my parents, Ryan said, tearing up. I listened solemnly. I thought it'd be okay to continue freelancing for their sake. Glancing at his parents, Ryan nodded. Daddy's been doing better lately, so I'm considering re-entering the workforce, especially now that I'm marrying Kelly. I gotta step up, he said, sniffling. I felt ashamed for feeling disappointed upon learning he was a freelancer. Ryan had simply prioritized his parents over his job. What a kind and warm-hearted person he is. All my previous anxieties and discomfort had completely disappeared. A few days later, I made a suggestion to Ryan. Why don't you try applying for a position at my company? Ryan seemed surprised by my sudden proposal. Only if you're okay with it, of course. I was careful not to pressure him. Ryan seemed hesitant about working at the same company as me. Our sales department is actually short on people. It would really help if you could join. I chose my words carefully, not wanting to hurt his pride. You'd be in a completely different department from me. However, Ryan's concerns were elsewhere. If I'm gonna work, I want to earn. I want to make Mommy feel secure. It was all about the money, then. Did he think I wasn't earning enough? So, I pulled out my tablet and showed Ryan our company's job site, detailing the average salary, holidays, paid leave, and benefits. This might not be too bad, Ryan said, looking over the tablet with growing interest. Just as the company was looking to significantly expand its sales team, Ryan was hired without a hitch. I had informed my secretary about Ryan's application from the moment it was submitted, thinking I might ask her to handle any potential issues in the future. I also had another request for the secretary related to our website. Ryan and I decided to get married as soon as he got the job. We didn't have a ceremony. I didn't want my relatives to know, and I wanted to keep it a secret from Ryan that I was the CEO. I was surprised how easily his parents agreed, fearing they would object. His mother was only concerned about how often we could visit their home. Instead of a wedding, we held a small dinner at a restaurant and postponed our honeymoon. I was busy with work, but Ryan also seemed unenthusiastic about a honeymoon. Can't be away from mommy and daddy, can I? There it was again. Mommy and daddy. It just didn't sit right with me. We decided against moving into a new house recommended by a real estate agent. Considering Ryan's freelancer status, it seemed best to avoid unnecessary expenses. After some thought, we chose my apartment as our new home. Ryan agreed. Probably because it was closer to his parents' house. After moving in together, Ryan's attitude began to change. He started looking down on me. Which department are you in? Ryan didn't seem to see me as a business owner. I didn't intend to keep it a secret, but I preferred it not to be widely known. Then, Ryan said something unbelievable. Well, it doesn't matter. You'll be quitting anyway. I was shocked. Quit? Who's quitting? What was he talking about? Was it not Ryan, but me who was supposed to quit? A bad feeling washed over me. Ryan glanced at me and smirked with an unfamiliar, unsettling smile. I felt a chill. Got a problem with that? Ryan looked at me coldly. My heart is racing. I managed to say I had no intention of quitting my job, clutching my chest. Then it hit me. Maybe Ryan wanted children. Are you thinking about when we will have kids? Our company has excellent maternity and paternity leave. Ryan interrupted with something unbelievable. Kids are out of the question. Got my hands full with mommy and daddy. I was confused, tilting my head. Ryan sighed heavily, exasperated. My parents, I told you. They need care. His sudden loud voice made me tense up. I tried to respond. I heard about your father's condition, but you said he's been doing better, which is why you re-entered the workforce. Even if he's better now, they're both old. Ryan snapped, anger flaring. Aren't you worried at all? His yelling filled the room, leaving me bewildered. I tried to calm down and sort through his words. It seemed Ryan intended to push his parents' care onto me, expecting me to quit my job to focus on it. After venting, Ryan smirked. Well, I won't ask you to quit immediately. Dual income brings in more money, after all. It seems my earnings were now the priority. We'll be going back to my parents' house on our days off. Every week? I intended to help as much as possible, but being pushed to provide care every week was too much. What surprised me the most was Ryan's attitude. Before we got married, Ryan was a fun-loving person with many interests, always finding joy in everything and reliably positive. I was at a loss for words by how much he had changed. Especially since a real estate agent had contacted us about a new house close to his parents' home, which was highly sought after, and I had gone ahead and signed the contract, hoping it would bring back the old Ryan. Now, the thought of going to his parents' house filled me with dread. Yet his parents always welcomed me warmly. It's good of you to come. We have some cookies someone gave us, let's have them together. His father said with a smile that reached his eyes. Sorry to have you come over on your day off. His mother said, showing great consideration for me. No, not at all. Having Kelly here makes it feel like my daughter has come home. His mother said, her eyes welling up with tears, and I felt the same warmth in my eyes. I decided to proceed with the new house purchase, thinking it would be all right with his parents around. His mother always prepared my favorite sweets whenever I visited, touching my heart each time. Despite not wanting to be dictated by Ryan, seeing his mother's happy face made me feel at ease. Eventually, Ryan and I started visiting his parents' house separately due to my work schedule, making it impossible to visit every weekend. Sometimes, I had to spend weekends out of town on business trips, so I made up for it by visiting during the weekdays. One weekday, I headed to his parents' house, familiar enough not to ring the doorbell. As I quietly entered and headed to the living room, I heard Ryan's voice, which was odd since he was supposed to be at work. Approaching the living room, I overheard a disturbing conversation and stopped to listen. "She's not very considerate, you know, and terrible at housework," said his mother, a tone I had never heard before. "Couldn't you find someone better?" It sounded nothing like the kind and gentle woman I knew. I felt a tightness in my chest. My hands are going cold. After all the praise and gentle moments shared, to hear such harsh words was shocking. I couldn't bring myself to leave, even though I didn't want to hear any more. Ryan's sly, smooth voice followed. "Sorry, Mommy, but she's pretty sturdy and should be good for physical work." I felt a growing revulsion towards Ryan. "It's all about training. With the right guidance, she'll be useful," he said. "I'm not Ryan and his mother's servant or slave. For now, we need her money, so we'll put up with it. We have high hopes for the future." They continued, laughing carelessly. I felt dizzy, my heart sinking. Despite the shock from Ryan's words, his mother's betrayal hit me harder. All her kindness, the shared moments of laughter, the cooking lessons. Was it all an act? Always smiling, sometimes with tears in her eyes. Was that all just an act? If so, staying in this marriage out of concern for her was a waste. It seemed I was merely seen as caregiving staff. And then, the final blow from his mother. "For now, we'll keep praising her, making her as happy as a fool." I felt faint. Her harsh words unending. "Learn from me how to manipulate her. And guess what? She bought a house nearby," Ryan said, sounding pleased. "How did he find out?" "The real estate agent called the house." I realized the real estate agent had called our home. A mistake on my part for not insisting on mobile contact only. "Isn't that great? Now we can make her work even harder for us," his mother said with a disdainful laugh. I had heard enough and quietly left the house, my grip on my phone so tight my hand was numb. On my way home, I sent Ryan and his mother a message saying I suddenly felt unwell. If I had known it would come to this, I would have never married. The word divorce was floating around in my head. I've always been someone who acts quickly once I've made up my mind. I always choose regretting doing something over not doing it at all. In society's eyes, divorcing so soon after getting married might seem bad. But considering the time spent with someone I dislike, sooner seemed better. I couldn't stand living with Ryan anymore. I immediately prepared the divorce papers. I'll also cancel the new house contract. If not handled well, I could lose my assets through property division. However, I think I'll be okay if I use Ryan's emotional abuse as leverage. I have both an excellent consulting lawyer and a sincere secretary on my side. After making my decision, I decided to act more cautiously. I avoided confronting Ryan and continued to pretend to be submissive. According to reports from my secretary, Ryan had caused several problems at work. This was just the tip of the iceberg. It seemed that divorcing Ryan wouldn't be enough to sever ties completely. I wanted to resolve the workplace issues quickly and then proceed with the divorce as soon as possible. And I decided to keep it a secret that I am the president of the company. If Ryan or his parents found out before the divorce, it could complicate things. Although it was embarrassing, I told my secretary everything. With her help, I steadily prepared for the divorce. Life with Ryan was suffocating, and I felt like I wasn't truly alive. Once I had a plan in place, I ran into Ryan at work. "Perfect timing," he said, approaching me with a full smile. He pulled me into an empty meeting room. You're hiding something from me, aren't you? Ryan's sneering laugh sent shivers down my spine. I heard you bought a house. Got a call saying it's ready to move in. I sighed inwardly. So, that was it. I'm moving in with my parents today. If you don't like it, we can divorce and you can leave. I was utterly disgusted. It seemed the time had come to face Ryan directly. He stood defiantly, smirking at me, thinking I would admit defeat and comply with his demands. The days of listening to him for his mother's sake were over. I had thought his parents were good people who cared about me. But after seeing his mother's true nature, I had no intention of confiding in his parents anymore. Then you're fired and can leave the company. I smiled at Ryan and confronted him with the truth. Huh? Ryan let out a perplexed noise, but probably thought it was some weird joke. He quickly regained his composure and laughed it off. Fired? You're not my boss. Have you lost your mind? I sighed softly and looked at Ryan with cold eyes. Seeing my gaze, Ryan tensed up. Anxiety spread across his face. I took a deep breath and spoke calmly. The funny thing is you not knowing the face of your company's president. I showed Ryan the company newsletter featuring an interview with me as the president, with my photo included. Ryan stared at the newsletter as if trying to bore holes through it, then looked back at me. You? No way, you're lying. His face drained of color as he muttered to himself. Got it now? Ryan seemed to collapse on the spot as if all the strength had left his body. No, it's not like that, Kelly. I didn't know anything. He pleaded, trembling and his voice shaking pathetically. Didn't know? No, you just didn't bother to find out. He could have known at any time if he wanted. The company newsletter was available in the break room and cafeteria, and a simple search on his smartphone or PC would bring up my photo. Even if the company website was deleted, my photo could still be found online. Simply put, Ryan wasn't interested. He lacked passion for his work, thus being relegated to menial tasks within the company. To him, the only important things at work were income, time off, and benefits. I was just another unimportant thing to him. But I needed more. We're not done here. We haven't finished talking about the divorce. Ryan visibly panicked. Do you even understand what you're saying? He never thought I would agree to a divorce. Yes, I can't become the ideal lady you want me to be. So, divorce is the only option. I pulled out the divorce papers from my bag. I had kept the divorce papers with me ever since I decided to divorce. Do you realize what you're doing? Ryan looked incredulously between the divorce papers and me. I took out a pen and placed it on the table. Sign it quickly. Ryan was frozen, his face drained of color. Oh, not divorcing? Was it all talk? Snapping back to reality, Ryan slammed the divorce papers on the table and signed them hastily. Now we are strangers to each other, I stated matter-of-factly. Don't come to regret it. Talking back to your husband is a failure as a wife, Ryan said mockingly. Good riddance. A woman who chooses her job over mommy and daddy, glad to be rid of you, he added, sounding like he was making excuses. Oh, my apologies, I replied calmly, not minding his comments. What are you going to do after divorcing? You know how sad my parents will be without you? Do you understand how lonely they'll feel? How ridiculous. They talked behind my back together. I was so angry that I couldn't find the words. I wanted to lash out at Ryan right there, but all I could do was clench my teeth and glare at him. Taking advantage of my silence, Ryan continued to berate me. Poor mommy and daddy, they said they're hungry and there's nothing to eat. So what? There are stores and supermarkets near their house. Go back to your parents. You can still make amends. Ryan arrogantly ordered me around. His parents aren't so immobile that they require care. It's just laziness. Enough is enough. We are strangers now. And I have an important meeting to attend today, I managed to say. anger brought me to a state of calm clarity. If it's so important, you should take a leave and go yourself. I refused to sacrifice my important company for the likes of them. I've been patient and obedient enough. Ryan, not expecting me to talk back, stepped back. You're talking back to me? For a wife, that's out of line. I've said it multiple times, but I'm not his wife anymore. Plus, Ryan's values are skewed. He must think a wife is a slave to her husband, silently obeying. And he only imposes things that are convenient for him. What do you mean a wife's place? Who do you think you are? I confronted Ryan without holding back. He gritted his teeth in frustration. They're your parents. Why don't you take care of them yourself before pushing it onto someone else? If they're so important, Ryan can take a leave and visit his mother himself. His job was just organizing the storeroom. With no deadlines or external appointments. He could easily take a day off if he talked to his boss, but he pushes it onto me. His mother's condition can't be that bad. It's just a desire to use me as they please. Ridiculous. Why should I have to take a leave for them? He's so selfish, even about his own parents. Ryan's illogical reasoning seems endless. Listen well. Taking care of mommy and daddy is your job. I'm tired of hearing mommy and daddy. What do you expect from me? I don't expect a sensible answer, but I asked Ryan anyway. Ryan scoffed and replied, You're supposed to take care of everything for mommy and daddy. I couldn't believe how absurd Ryan was being. How shameless can he get? I'm a stranger now. Take a leave and go yourself. I stated plainly. Ryan choked up. Unable to respond. The care of his mother shouldn't be pushed onto me, he should take a leave and handle it himself. To do nothing and complain only to me is outrageous. You would have been satisfied with anyone who would take care of your parents, wouldn't you? Ryan opened and closed his mouth, shaking his head. His face was pale. That's not true. If I had known Kelly was the president, I wouldn't have made her take care of them. Despite saying know your place as a wife earlier, Ryan quickly changed his tune. Deep down, I knew he wanted to exploit me to his advantage. And this was his way of flattering me. However, Ryan gave himself away with his next comment. With enough money, you can hire someone. There it was, the crux of the matter. Ryan always relied on others. So, caregiving is someone else's responsibility, huh? Are you planning to just play around with mommy while doing nothing? That's not it. Ryan said with a forced smile. Suggesting maybe a different future could have been possible if they had manipulated me better. The thought alone was horrifying. What if I hadn't known the true nature of Ryan's parents? I might have happily agreed to his proposals. There could have been a possibility where Ryan focused on caregiving, and I was the breadwinner. Ryan had squandered that chance himself. It might have been a stroke of luck for me. Ryan looked up at me with tearful eyes, pleading. Please, let's start over. We were good together, weren't we? Let's go places again. I remembered the various places Ryan took me on dates before we got married. The places you took me were fun. I acknowledged, and Ryan's face lit up. Perhaps thinking there was a chance. I was foolish to be deceived. It's been hell since we got married. I glanced at my watch, indicating I was in a hurry. Well, I have a meeting to prepare for. I'll contact you about the dismissal. Waving lightly at Ryan, I reached for the door to leave. Before I could open it, Ryan grabbed my left hand. Turning around, I found Ryan glaring at me. We're not done here. Getting fired and divorced, do you think I'll just accept that? Ryan confronted me with tearful eyes. And what's this about being the president? His words trailed off, and eventually, he let go of my hand. The divorce was Ryan's idea in the first place. And it was their fault I couldn't reveal I was the president. Ryan probably never expected me to accept the divorce. He thought threatening me with divorce would make me obey him. And my being the president must have been a shock. Not something an adult should do. Ryan clenched his jaw. likely regretting the money he had lost, but that was not my concern. It just shows how foolish you were, I said, and Ryan exploded in a reversed voice. Coward! Is it right for a big company's president to fire an employee just because of a divorce? That's tyranny. Whether he had lost his reason or was just being defiant, Ryan puffed out his chest. His thinking was too childish. Unable to accept what I said, he was just throwing a tantrum. Too tired to deal with Ryan, I covered my face with my hands. And Ryan grinned, thinking he had hit the mark. Right on target, huh? Should I make a scene? You'd be the one in trouble. I was exhausted. Though I thought about keeping silent, I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag. Reading the names written on it. Ms. Smith from General Affairs, Ms. West and Ms. Brown from Sales, and Ms. Ortega from Accounting. I then looked at Ryan, who was sweating. There are more names, you know. Ryan stepped back towards the wall, trying to distance himself. The names I just mentioned are of women you've been persistently hitting on. This issue was reported to me by my secretary. Complaints had come into HR, and my secretary informed me. The only person in the company who knew Ryan and I were married was my secretary. When I heard it from her, I couldn't believe it. That my husband was hitting on several female employees. And quite persistently, it seemed. I was so embarrassed by this revelation that I felt like my face was on fire. I was just trying to foster better relations among staff. Ryan made a pathetic excuse. As if such a lame excuse would work. Inviting them to a hotel, what kind of relations were those? Ryan was left mumbling, unable to form words. I had messages sent to my smartphone from the women as evidence. The content was embarrassingly cringeworthy. Ryan had no way out. He needed to face the consequences. Removing a troublemaker from the company is part of a president's job, I told him firmly. Ryan slumped, defeated. To further corner him, I pulled out an envelope from my bag. This is from accounting. It seems you've tampered with some receipts. Ryan reluctantly took the envelope, avoiding my gaze, and fell silent. A mama's boy who leaves everything to others, a womanizer, and on top of that, stingy. Ryan has been a nuisance not just to me, but to many others. It's a fact that he's the worst kind of person, yet I had believed in him. I'm disappointed in myself for not seeing his true colors. Anyway, you're fired. You will be held accountable. I turned on my heel and opened the door to the meeting room. As expected, Ryan didn't try to stop me. He was slumped against the wall, powerless. Well then. Enjoy your time with your parents at your family home. Ryan collapsed on the spot, mumbling something, but I left him behind and exited the room. After a while, my secretary brought me an official report. Following the report, Ryan was immediately dismissed for disciplinary reasons. I issued an apology to the female employees affected. In the name of the president, ensuring their mental well-being is not neglected, monitored through my secretary. Regular reports on Ryan's behavior also come through the secretary from a private investigator. According to the reports, Ryan, now jobless, returned to live with his parents. He tried to start working again as a freelancer, but then something unexpected happened. His father was diagnosed as needing care. And shortly after, his mother developed dementia. Ryan ended up caring for both his father and mother. His mother sometimes wanders at night, leading to sleepless nights for Ryan. Working during the day and caring for his parents afterward, he said he didn't have enough bodies to cope. I need help. Please provide some financial assistance. Ryan contacted me several times. If the divorce had been amicable, I might have helped. However, Ryan and his family treated me like a slave. There's no room for sympathy for such people. Each time, I responded to Ryan with a professional tone. I am unable to assist you. Please refrain from further contact. Should it continue, appropriate actions will be taken. After that, Ryan stopped contacting me. Deciding that I had enough of marriage after divorcing Ryan, I chose to live on my own. I kept the new house I had contracted and rented it out. It's on land likely to appreciate in value, so there shouldn't be any loss. Work is going well, and the company's performance is on the rise. Work has become my purpose in life, and I'm more devoted to it than ever. However, I can't quit bowling, which Ryan introduced me to. I still participate in tournaments and have joined a bowling community circle. Most members are older than me, providing a wealth of life experience to learn from. Recently, a man close to my age joined the group. Unlike Ryan, he's gentle, unassuming, and reserved. Yet, when he gets a strike, his joyous expression is so charming, I find myself secretly thrilled. For now, I keep telling myself that my job is my life. Someday, happiness will come my way, too. With that hope, I continue to dedicate myself to work every day. My name is Rachel, and I'm 38 years old. I got divorced 6 years ago and remarried 3 years back. Me, my first hubby Dan, and my current hubby, Lewis, we all worked together at Smith Foods. Dan and Lewis were like oil and water, always competing, but they both really gave their all for the company. After me and Dan decided to tie the knot, I quit my job. The next year, our little girl Julie came into our world. Our marriage was like a fairy tale, at least for the first 5 years. Then things started to go south. Dan fell head over heels for a gal 10 years his junior, named Natalie. He hardly ever came home, and it tore me up. Eventually, I decided to divorce him. I've been a single mom to Julie ever since. While Dan was off with his new flame, Lewis, bless his heart, reached out to me worried. We started talking, not just about Dan, and before we knew it, we ended up tying the knot. Lewis never let on that he was the big boss's son at the office. I didn't have a clue until after we got married. Turns out, my second marriage was like hitting the jackpot. Julie and I have been living the high life. Not long ago, we went skiing in Switzerland. Poor Julie had an accident and now she's in a wheelchair. While I was dropping her off at school, I saw someone at the gate. It was Dan. My ex, who left me for another woman 6 years ago. Thought remarriage was a miracle for you. But look at you now, back to a life of misery. It's almost funny. Then Lewis rolls up in his fancy car, and Dan's face just goes white as a sheet. What? Lewis? Driving such a fancy car? Lewis is the son of the president of Smith Foods. He's about to become the youngest president in the company's history. Talk about a plot twist, huh? I wanted to share the life journey that led me to this point of happiness. The company's huge, isn't it? Didn't seem this big when we first interviewed? It's a long-standing food company. It's still growing and listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Dan, Lewis, and I joined Smith Foods and were assigned to the PR department. On our first day, Dan wouldn't stop talking, and we planned to grab some drinks to get to know each other better. Man, your French is incredible. My dad's background is French. I was born and raised right here in the US. Rachel, I heard you're also fluent in French. Did you grow up abroad? I've always been fond of French. I studied it more in the Global Studies program at college. Wow, I can't speak a lick of it, but somehow I still got hired. Guess I'm lucky. Being in the same starting group, me, Dan, and Lewis would often go out for drinks. We got pretty close. But Dan, getting greedier by the day, started to see Lewis as his rival. Doesn't it seem like Lewis is the boss's pet? He's even on the cover of our PR magazine. Sure, he's good-looking with a tall stature. I can give him that. But a regular employee, acting like a model? And he's always in the spotlight at work, like he's the face of the company. If they gave me a chance, I could outdo him. I don't want to lose to him, not in work, not in anything. I don't think Lewis cares about winning or losing. He's just doing what's asked of him. He even said he's tired of being judged by his looks alone. Do you and Lewis ever go out for drinks, just the two of you? Well, if he invites me. Around this time, it seems Dan started to have feelings for me. I had a sense of it but pretended not to notice as there were no clear words or actions from him. The three of us, Dan, Lewis, and I, grew closer both at work and in our private lives, inspiring and challenging each other. 2 years after joining Smith Foods, Dan asked me out.
What should I do? How should I respond?
Maybe I was being the villain here, but I talked to Lewis about Dan. If you don't dislike him, why not go out with him? I respect Dan and think he's a good guy. He could make you happy. Dan was a man of intense but transient passions. His tendency to get completely absorbed in something was somewhat frightening. But I gave an honest okay to Dan, who had expressed his feelings directly. Dan and I got married when we were 25. I left my job to focus on family life. It's a shame you're leaving. You had the potential to be a career woman. You're always attentive to details others miss, finishing tasks before they're even requested. It's really a waste.
Thank you. You're the only one who appreciates me that way. Contact me anytime if you need anything. Though, I think Dan will take good care of you. If he ever cheats, I'll be right there to give him a piece of my mind.
Lewis said lightly, a statement I would come to remember.
Dan, if you're going to be late, at least let me know. Dinner's going to waste.
Stop nagging. It's because of your constant complaining that I don't want to come home.
Don't forget, Julie has her school play tomorrow.
Tomorrow? I've got plans, but I can't make them.
What? I told you to keep your schedule free ages ago. Julie's looking forward to you being there.
6 years into our marriage. Our daughter Julie is now 5. The once doting father, Dan, had changed completely. I wondered what caused it. Was it because he knew I was aware of his affair? Dan was boldly enjoying his time with his mistress. This mistress was a piece of work, shamelessly bragging and belittling me, his wife. Oh, tomorrow's your mistress's birthday, right? You withdrew savings for a brand accessory gift, didn't you? I saw her bragging about it on social media. Her family's wealthy, right? Her dad's a company president? So why are you spoiling her? Are you being played?
It's creepy how you snoop around.
I got this information from a junior at Smith Foods, Bob, who had taken a liking to me and admired me. Dan was apparently proud of having a mistress. He blabbered and boasted about things I didn't even ask. I heard you met her at her cafe at the station. She was so cute that you gave her your number, hoping for a chance. And she contacted you first, right? That woman, either she's not used to attention or she's overly confident. And she's just in her 20s, right? I doubt she's serious about you. I'm not a lost cause yet. Dan declared defiantly, choosing to be open rather than hide. So, you frequented her cafe every day, and it paid off. Don't you realize you get too obsessed with one thing and lose sight of everything else? I've always been devoted. Did you know your mistress has been harassing me? It's pretty serious slander. If I take this to a lawyer, it could be a legal case. She's posting on my social media, calling me horrible names, accusing me of not doing housework, of cheating. She's spreading lies. The other moms at Julie's kindergarten have seen it, and now they treat me like a pariah. If this continues, I'm going to take action. Reacting to such trivial stuff and getting all worked up? Are you a child? Stop making a fuss, it's tiring. I'm going to take a shower and sleep. But the situation worsened. Rachel? It's me, Lewis. Out of the blue, I received a call from Lewis. It had been a while since I heard his voice, as I had left my job for family life. And Dan rarely spoke about work, let alone about Lewis.
Lewis! It's been a while. How are you?
Actually, Dan has been absent without notice for the past few days. I was wondering if he's sick or something. Dan hadn't been coming home for the last few days, and now he wasn't even showing up at work. But I couldn't bring myself to tell Lewis about this embarrassing situation. Well, maybe he's not feeling well. Sorry about that. I'll make sure he contacts the office.
Are you okay?
Louis asked, his concern almost bringing me to tears. I wanted to confide everything in him. To have someone sympathize and comfort me.
If it's going to be a long absence, I really need him to let us know. Right now, Dan, me, and 3 others are handling a big project. He is the group leader. Honestly, we can't proceed without him.
I'm sorry for the trouble he's causing everyone.
I guess he'll have to step down from this project then, if it's holding things up.
I'll pass the message to Dan, I said, realizing the severity of the impact on his work. I felt helpless, knowing there was nothing more I could do. I tried calling Dan, though I expected no answer. My emails were being ignored, and the phone calls went unanswered. Hello? To my surprise, it wasn't Dan, but his mistress who answered. Oh, it's his wife.
Dan's in the shower, can't come to the phone. Do you have a message for him? Is my husband staying at your place? Yeah, he stays here most of the time, occasionally at a hotel, but mostly at my place.
Are you keeping him from going to work? Are you the possessive type? Dan's planning to quit his current job for a new opportunity.
What? I haven't heard anything about that.
Maybe he can't be honest with you?
He says you're scared when you're angry. He told me he's often left wandering the streets at night because you won't let him in.
She was spouting all sorts of things, lies Dan had probably told her to make it seem like their marriage was failing. A typical tactic of an unfaithful husband.
My father owns a business. Dan's going to take over as president soon. It's a great opportunity he wouldn't want to miss. Men want to be at the top, don't they? That's something you couldn't give him. I can make him a president. That's part of my charm.
Her father's business, a cafe, was just a small shop in front of the station. They were planning to expand into a chain. But I wondered if becoming president of such a business was really what Dan wanted. Given his aspirations when we first joined Smith Foods.
Why don't you just file for divorce? Dan doesn't come home or go to work, so what's the point of staying married? It's not that simple. We have a daughter, Julie. Are you the one keeping Dan from coming home?
What? No way.
He approached me first, and I reluctantly responded. I'm with him because he listens to me. I wasn't planning to marry, but my dad was looking for a successor. Dan just happened to be there.
He's lucky, isn't he?
Getting to marry someone 10 years younger and become a president.
Of course, he wouldn't want to go back to you. I could almost see her smug face. I had checked her social media. She was the typical influencer type, flaunting her lavish lifestyle with branded goods. She's deliberately posting with the prices included. It seems like she's being supported by young women who aspire to be like Natalie.
Sorry to bother you again. Today, Dan's agent contacted me. He wants to resign. Probably hired one of those famous resignation services. It's kind of unmanly for him, isn't it? So, he's officially resigned, but what are you planning to do with him?
It's likely going to end in divorce.
Divorce? It's come to that?
The truth is, Dan doesn't plan to come home anymore. He's been at his mistress's place for almost a month, no contact, not coming home.
What? It's gotten that bad? That's serious.
Divorcing now, when my daughter Julie is just about to start school, would hurt her, wouldn't it? I tried to envision us getting back together, but it's impossible now. Dan has completely moved on to his mistress.
Dan has always been the type to forge ahead once he makes up his mind, not listening to others.
That's why I think he left everything behind to be with her, kind of like eloping.
If there's anything I can do, don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you. Since then, I often found myself turning to Louis for advice. Even on the day I signed the divorce papers, I instinctively called him.
I'm disappointed in Dan. He always said he would never cheat. Aren't you about the age to start thinking about marriage? Don't you have someone special? No, not really. I think I'm okay with getting married around 40. I don't have any particular desire or ideal vision of marriage.
He was as handsome in character as he was in looks. Popular but never boastful or arrogant. I was genuinely curious about what kind of woman Lewis would eventually marry. Even after my divorce from Dan was finalized, I kept getting updates from my junior, Bob. He loved gossip and was known as Smith Foods' very own entertainment reporter.
I'm so tired. What's for dinner tonight?
Order delivery. I'm tired too. I heard that Dan, now married to his mistress Natalie, was struggling. He had been handed the reins of the cafe, her father's business, and was already facing difficulties. Dan had initially been enthusiastic about turning the business around, but he couldn't fully commit to the job, finding it uninteresting.
Tired? That's because you've been out and about, not doing housework. You wanted to do it perfectly and even stopped working at the shop, but in the end, you didn't do anything. I'm only 22, you know? My friends are still single. I'm not going to be tied down at home.
Their marriage was clearly not going well. 3 years after my divorce from Dan and his marriage to Natalie, they were still together, albeit unhappily.
Wow, here?
Julie was understandably surprised. I was even more so. Julie and I were standing in front of Lewis's family mansion, having been invited over. The house was enormous.
Hey, welcome.
Lewis greeted us warmly, his charm just as evident in private. Meeting Lewis's parents and having a pleasant conversation with them, it suddenly dawned on me.
Your father is from Smith Foods, right? You didn't use the Smith surname. Was it to avoid being known as the president's son?
I couldn't just become the president overnight. I wanted to start from the ground up, to understand what our employees go through. My dad still says I have a lot to learn. I'm really sorry for keeping it a secret until now. No way, this is like hitting the jackpot. Lewis had recently proposed to me, and today I was meeting his parents to officially announce our engagement.
I feel so honored that you would marry someone like me, a divorced woman with a daughter.
Why are you being so formal? Just be your usual self, Rachel. Lewis lightened the mood, and we spent the day with smiles. Lewis had always been there to listen and advise me during the rough patch with Dan. Our growing closeness seemed inevitable. My biggest concern about remarrying was Julie. Would she need a new dad? Why does Lewis have to leave? Why can't he just stay with us? Julie had asked earlier. It seemed that her memories with Dan were being replaced by those with Lewis, elevating his place in her heart. Then one day, Julie called Lewis Dad and expressed her wish for him to be her father. That's how Lewis and I started preparing for our marriage.
What? Rachel and Lewis getting married?
That was Dan's initial reaction when our junior colleague Bob, a gossip lover, told him about our wedding.
When did this happen?
Rachel doesn't like guys like Lewis. She used to say he's too skinny and unreliable. She needs someone like me who goes to the gym. We're complete opposites. Rachel's taste in men is so inconsistent. She just goes for any guy who says he likes her. She's not even that pretty, and she's got a kid, and she's in her mid-30s. A younger, prettier woman without a kid is obviously better. What is Lewis thinking? With his looks and brains, why a divorced woman with a child? What's his angle? They'll break up soon, maybe in 3 years. Me and Natalie? Dan was evasive when it came to his own affairs. But Bob skillfully managed to draw the conversation out. After all, even though it's a small cafe, people say the prices are high. The coffee taste isn't that bad either. That's why I've kept the prices high, but the customers don't seem to understand. They wonder why good drinks can't be cheap. But the scale is just too different. I used to work for Smith Foods, a big food company, you know? Dealing with a coffee for $5 each, that's just small fry. And about Natalie, are things going well with her? Since the beginning of the marriage, there was an uneasy atmosphere, but it has somehow lasted for 3 years. Things aren't going well with Natalie.
She's young, with a wide social circle, and won't listen to me. Her parents just dumped the failing business on me and turned a blind eye. We're like a couple in name only. I tend to get obsessed and then lose interest quickly. Natalie can't leave me now that I've taken over her father's failing business. She should be grateful to me, but we'd barely have a marriage. No housework, no marital life. A housekeeper? Impossible, her family isn't that rich. Just because someone calls themselves a president doesn't mean they're wealthy. I was astounded by how freely he talked to a junior colleague. Hearing such complaints about his wife and work made me even angrier. Dan was clearly upset about my happy life with Louis. He hadn't accepted the fact that I was remarrying Louis. Then, 3 years later, "There's something important I need to discuss." I got a sudden call from Dan. It had been about a year since I last heard from him. "I'd like to see Julie at least once a month. I can't afford a lawyer, so I want to talk to you directly." His sudden interest in Julie seemed too convenient. He never mentioned wanting to see her in the past 6 years. Probably some trouble with Natalie made him think of Julie. I later found out that at this time, Dan was under a lot of pressure both at work and at home. I'll have to ask Julie. She barely remembers you as her dad since you separated before she started elementary school. She's close to Louis now. If she says no, you'll have to accept that. What does Julie say about me? Why would she talk about you? You think too highly of yourself. When I asked Julie, she didn't want to see Dan. I told him her honest answer. Is that really what Julie said? Or are you making her say that? Or maybe you're lying to me. What can I do to make you believe me? After I said that, Dan was left speechless. For a while, there was no contact from him, so I thought he had given up on meeting Julie. Yet, today, he was lurking at the gate of Julie's elementary school. Julie was in a wheelchair, and Dan mistakenly assumed she was disabled. She had injured herself skiing on our recent trip to Switzerland and was using the wheelchair just until she recovered. But Dan made a very rude comment about it. What's all this commotion? Louis arrived in a luxury car to drop off Julie. Why such a fancy car? Louis, really? Louis is the son of the president of Smith Foods. He's set to take over as president soon. What? Louis is the president's son? He never hinted at that. Why did he keep it a secret from us? Was it because he thought we would act differently around the president's son? That's just arrogance. Even changing his name. He should have worked at another company if he wanted to start from the bottom. If he doesn't have the guts for that, he shouldn't be president. Louis is too soft. Dan ranted, seizing the opportunity to complain about Louis. Even when we were married, he always bad-mouthed Louis. What are you doing here? If you don't have business, please leave. I can call the police for suspicious behavior. You're just showing off because Rachel's here. You don't look good at all. I'll excuse myself then. I came to see Julie. She's my child, I have the right to see her. I already told you, Julie doesn't want to meet you. Whether that's true or not. And I don't want her to meet you either. You chose your mistress over a still young Julie. I think you're unclean for that reason. You barely attended Julie's kindergarten events. Do you have any idea how lonely she felt? Do you know what she said the first time she wore her school backpack? She wondered if you would be happy to see her. After that day, she stopped talking about you completely. I said, holding back tears. I not only worked a day job, but I also worked as a web writer from home to ensure an income. I was so busy with housework that I hardly had time to talk with Julie. I made her feel lonely too. So that's why you married wealthy Louis. I didn't even know Louis's father was the president until we decided to get married. I was drawn to Louis's kindness and warmth. Even if he weren't the president's son, I would have married him. You and Louis have been together since you joined the company as new employees, weren't you? This kind of thinking is pointless. He's just trying to find a loophole to gain an advantage because he's at a disadvantage. Now that I think about it, There are a lot of things that make sense. She just happened to start dating and then marry me when she was having a little fight with Lewis. Maybe that's the real story, huh? That's a far-fetched story. We have nothing to be ashamed of in our relationship. Just a man chaser, huh? You always pick men from the same circle. Married 2 guys from the same PR department you joined. You should broaden your horizons. And what about your marriage? Married a girl 10 years younger, abandoning Julie. She's probably tired of you by now. That's typical for you, isn't it? Happy just to win someone over, but then you lose interest. The classic once you've caught the fish, you don't feed it mindset. This conversation is a waste of time. I'm leaving. Running away, huh? Figures, you can't have an equal conversation with me. I'm not interested in small fry. I heard your rice ball shop is in trouble. Good luck with your presidency. I have bigger business goals in mind than a $5 coffee.
In the end, Lewis had the last word. I got emotional too. Dan's greatest punishment for abandoning everything for his mistress was that he would never see his own daughter again. And as Lewis said, Dan's cafe went bankrupt. Dan, now the president, was saddled with debt. He had been tricked into taking over Natalie's father's failing business. Dan was deceived because of his own ulterior motives. Natalie, having found a new boyfriend, left him and filed for divorce. Then came a happy event for me. I was pregnant with Lewis's child. Though it was a late pregnancy, both Lewis and I were overjoyed. His parents were happy about that. And Julie was thrilled, which comforted me. I don't regret marrying Dan. After all, he gave me Julie, the greatest treasure. My grandson, David, experienced his first winter this year. The weather report mentioned that it was a record cold day. I couldn't help but worry about David and his mother, Yvonne. I hope they haven't fallen ill due to the cold. That night, I sent a message to Yvonne on my smartphone, asking, "Are you and the baby okay? Not catching a cold?" However, despite sending it 2 or 3 times, there was no reply, not even a read receipt. She's always been so responsible, I hope she's not overdoing it. After waiting another hour, I tried calling but to no avail. This is no small matter. Worried something serious had happened, I quickly put on my thick jumper and rushed out to drive to my son's family apartment. There was no response when I rang the intercom, and fearing the worst, that Yvonne had collapsed inside, I had the building manager open the door. The apartment was dark, with only the faint light from the street lamps seeping in. Groping along the wall, I searched for the light switch, relying on my memory. I fumbled for the light switch, but, even after trying several times, the lights wouldn't turn on. What's going on here? I thought, feeling a mix of anxiety and irritation. With no other option, I used my smartphone's flashlight to look around. Yvonne? Are you there? Could it be that they are just out? Just as I was about to leave, I thought I heard a baby's cry from the bedroom. Yvonne? Are you there? I quickly headed to the bedroom. Yvonne! There, I found Yvonne, shivering from the cold but desperately wrapping newborn David in a sheet to keep him warm. What happened? To my shock, Yvonne's once long and proud black hair was now chopped off, almost completely shaved. This is terrible! What happened here? My name is Mary Smith, I'm 61 years old. I've worked as a hairstylist for many years, running a salon out of my home. Chatting casually with my regulars during their appointments has always been the highlight of my day. The salon was originally started by my husband and me. However, he passed away from cancer when he was young. Not long after our son, Harry, was born. Despite the challenges, I raised Harry single-handedly. But Harry didn't make it easy. He often skipped school and got into trouble when he did attend. After graduating high school, he didn't continue his education and instead spent his days hanging out in town. I often wondered if it was a sense of inferiority from not having a father around. Or maybe it's because I wasn't a good enough mother. I always worried about Harry's future, never finding an answer. So, when Harry suddenly said one day, "I want to be a hairstylist," I was so surprised I pinched my cheek, thinking I was dreaming. "What's gotten into you? Hairstylists are popular with the ladies, right?" Harry replied with a smirk. "Guess kids do grow up watching their parents, huh?" Regardless of the reason, I decided to take a positive view of my son showing interest in his future for the first time. Harry successfully graduated from cosmetology school and started working as an apprentice at a senior's salon. That's where he met Yvonne, who would later become his wife. Harry was smitten with her at first sight and, after a strong pursuit, announced to me with a confident smile, "I've decided to marry this girl," introducing me to Yvonne.
Nice to meet you. I'm Yvonne. You are a hairstylist too, right? I look forward to learning from you.
Yvonne, with her long black hair and bright smile, was a wonderful woman.
Likewise, I look forward to that.
I replied, instantly liking her. A year after their marriage, Harry expressed his desire to start his own salon. Though he hadn't been an apprentice for long, he seemed to have gained a lot of confidence as a hairstylist.
I want to have my own place and prove my skills.
Honestly, I was a bit worried. I knew from my experience that it's not easy for a newcomer to make it on their own in this industry. But I couldn't ignore the earnest look in Harry's eyes as he talked about his dream. "How much do you have saved up?" He showed me his bank book with a troubled look and a sigh. Despite having a steady income, he was spending just as much as he earned. With this pattern, he was far from having enough to start his own business. Harry had been squandering most of his earnings on leisure. Perhaps I should have advised him to give up then. But I smiled and said, "Don't worry about the money," indulging his whim. Maybe it was my way of making up for the loneliness of growing up without a father. Truth be told, I hadn't touched the life insurance money left by my late husband. "It's for Harry. You'd forgive me, right?" I whispered to my husband's portrait. One of my regulars was knowledgeable in real estate, so I consulted with her.
That place would be perfect.
It was a property that had been used as a barbershop until half a year ago, but the owner had retired due to old age. The location wasn't bad, and she thought it might be just right for Harry's new start. During the renovation, one of my regulars said, "Use my husband, he just lazes around the house on his days off anyway." Another chimed in, "My son's studying architecture in college and is home for the summer break. He can help out too, get some hands-on experience." Thanks to their help, the construction went smoothly. Once we got the health department's approval, the salon opened in no time.
I never imagined I could set up my own business so quickly.
You should thank everyone. It's not something you could have done alone.
I know. I'm grateful to you, Mom.
Then, I handed Harry the bank book containing the remainder of his father's inheritance. The purchase and renovation costs were lower than expected, so there was still more than half left.
"This is a gift from your father to you. Use it wisely for business expenses, and don't you dare waste it."
Yeah. I'm not a kid, I get it," Harry said, chuckling in annoyance.
"Don't worry. I'll keep a close eye on Harry to make sure he doesn't spend the money foolishly,"
Yvonne said with a bright smile. Her words made me laugh. With Yvonne's help, I didn't need to worry about interfering any further. I optimistically decided to watch over their business from a distance. But soon, I realized my optimism was misplaced. Yvonne occasionally visited my salon to update me on their progress, and each time, her expression grew more somber. 3 months after Harry's salon opened, she confided, "Harry's not putting his heart into the work."
"What? Harry? Why?"
He was so enthusiastic at first, sure that his skills would bring in customers. But within a month, he stopped smiling and began treating customers coldly. As a result, our reputation has plummeted, and customers have stopped coming. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Harry had wanted his own salon so badly. What had changed in such a short time? Harry thought that being a good hairstylist was all it took, but running a salon is more than that. Yvonne sighed. Indeed, she was right. Business doesn't work just the quality of your work. Customer service plays a huge role in business. It seemed Harry was missing that fundamental understanding. So, what's Harry doing now? He's frustrated about the lack of customers and spends his days drinking. If he doesn't get his act together, we'll lose even more clients. Right now, I'm handling the customers we do have, but if our reputation keeps dropping, the business will only get worse. Yvonne explained, looking like she was on the verge of tears. I felt the same way. All right, I'll have a serious talk with him next time I see him.
Thank you so much,
Yvonne said, bowing deeply before brushing back her long black hair.
Your hair is always so stunning,
I commented, trying to lighten the mood. I started growing it out in middle school, she said proudly. Been that long? Any particular reason? Are you familiar with hair donation? Yvonne looked at me earnestly. Hair donation? I think I heard about it at a hairstylist's meeting, but I don't know much about it. Yvonne's eyes sparkled as she explained.
It's about making wigs from real hair for children who've lost their hair due to congenital diseases, illness, or accidents. I've been growing my hair to donate to organizations involved in this. Isn't it wonderful to be able to help someone? I read an article about an actress who was doing it, and I thought, maybe I could do that too. Wow. That's really admirable, especially for someone as young as you,
I said, overwhelmed by Yvonne's passion. 6 months into her marriage with Harry, Yvonne got pregnant. She's always been so conscientious, always pushing herself too hard when I'm not looking.
Yvonne, this is the most crucial time. You really shouldn't overdo it,
I repeatedly warned her. Every time, she'd just lightly laugh and say, don't worry. I'm taking it easy, consulting with the baby in my belly. But in reality, Yvonne worked at the salon right up until the last month of her pregnancy, supporting the family while Harry's attitude worsened. What is he even thinking? Every time Yvonne updated me, I felt my own shortcomings as a mother. One day, I finished work early and decided to check on their salon. I ran into Harry just as he was about to leave. Where are you going? Out for a drink. There won't be any more customers today anyway, he said nonchalantly, laughing off his situation. The lack of customers had become normal for Harry, and he wasn't even trying to improve things anymore. You're about to become a father, you know. Harry just waved his hand dismissively and hopped on his motorcycle.
We're not done talking. Think about Yvonne for once.
Yeah. I'll do that when I feel like it. He laughed and sped off. Inside the salon, Yvonne was cleaning the floor. Today, we managed to get just one customer, she said, smiling brightly despite looking exhausted.
Are you eating properly? You need to get enough nutrition.
Don't worry about me. It's not just about you. It's for the baby, I said sternly, making sure she understood the gravity of the situation. Yvonne teared up a bit and thanked me. At times like this, the father should be there to support her. I wanted to shout at Harry, who was nowhere to be found. Yvonne told me the salon wasn't doing well, and Harry was spending money recklessly every night. Giving that bank book to Harry was a mistake. I regretted my decision. Yvonne, despite being busy, never neglected her hair care. Gently stroking her belly, she said, I want to teach my child the joy of helping others. That's when I realized I wanted to support her. Since my son wasn't of much help, I decided to assist Yvonne at their apartment. I'm always sorry to trouble you.
Don't worry about it, just focus on the baby.
It was my fault for not raising my son right. Because of that, Yvonne was suffering. Perhaps it was my way of atoning for my sins, at least. At the end of summer, Yvonne went into labor earlier than expected and was rushed to the hospital. Harry was nowhere to be found, unreachable. I kept sending him messages, but there were no replies, not even read receipts.
What on earth is he doing at a time like this?
Yvonne's parents had passed away, so I was the only one who could be there for her.
Don't worry, Yvonne, I'm here.
I kept encouraging her as she bravely faced childbirth. After a long and difficult labor, I was overwhelmed by the sound of the baby's cries.
He's born. You did it, Yvonne.
I was moved to tears, but Harry, who should have been there, never showed up. My grandson, David, was experiencing his first winter. The weather report said it was a record cold day. No wonder it was so chilly that I had trouble getting out of bed. My first thoughts were of Yvonne and newborn David. I hoped they weren't affected by the cold. Worried, I sent a message to Yvonne that night.
Are you and the baby okay? Haven't caught a cold?
But even after sending 2 or 3 messages, there was no response, not even a read receipt. I was concerned that Yvonne might be too ill to move. She's always been so responsible. I hope she's not overdoing it. After waiting another hour, I tried calling again, but the result was the same.
Something's not right.
Without a second thought, I put on my thick jumper and rushed out to their apartment. When I arrived, the place was engulfed in darkness. It's not uncommon for families to travel abroad during the holidays, but I hadn't heard anything about a trip from Yvonne and Harry, and they likely couldn't afford it anyway. I rang the intercom, but there was no response. Fearing Yvonne might have collapsed, I immediately asked the building manager to open the door. I'll wait outside. Please let me know if there's anything. I told the manager before stepping inside. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps outside. I remembered the light switch was right by the entrance. Relying on my memory, I groped for the light switch on the wall. But no matter how many times I flipped it on and off, the lights didn't respond at all. What's going on here? I thought, feeling a mixture of anxiety and irritation. With no other option, I used my smartphone's flashlight to illuminate the room as I stepped inside. Yvonne, are you here? I called out in the living room, but there was no answer. Maybe they had just gone out. Just as I was about to leave, I thought I heard a faint cry of a baby from the bedroom. Yvonne? Are you in there? I quickly headed toward the sound.
Yvonne!
There was Yvonne, shivering from the cold, desperately wrapping newborn David in a sheet to keep him warm.
What happened here?
When I shone the light on her, I was shocked to see that her once long, proud black hair had been roughly cut off, almost to the scalp. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, looked at me helplessly. This is terrible. How did this happen? I took off my jumper and draped it over Yvonne.
It's okay now. Just tell me what happened, as much as you can.
Yvonne began to speak slowly. She said that Harry had continued his daily escapades even after David was born. Eventually, they couldn't pay the electric bill anymore, and Yvonne, unable to tolerate it any longer, scolded Harry. She had just wanted him to be more responsible as a father. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. In a fit of rage, Harry grabbed a pair of practice hair-cutting scissors and started cutting off Yvonne's hair. At first, Yvonne tried to resist, saying stop it. But fearing any further resistance might accidentally harm David, she stopped resisting. Harry laughed mockingly, saying, "Now you won't be able to show your face in public." I was speechless at my son's cruel actions.
Why didn't you tell me it had gotten this bad?
I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Yvonne apologized, blaming herself again.
No, Yvonne, it's not your fault. You're not the one to blame here. It's Harry. You did nothing wrong.
I knew Yvonne hadn't confided in me because she didn't want to worry me. I hugged her tightly, tears streaming down my face. The whole situation was a result of my overindulgence in raising Harry. My heart burned with shame and anger at my own failings and my son's inability to empathize with others. Taking a deep breath, I called Harry.
Hey, Mom. Long time no talk. What's up, calling all of a sudden?
Just wanted to hear your voice. How's everything over there? Are Yvonne and David doing okay?
Of course, everyone's fine and doing well.
I've been calling home, but no one's picking up. Where are you now? There was a brief pause in his voice, as if he was concocting an excuse.
Actually, we're a family of 3 in Hawaii. We'll be back next week.
Hawaii, huh? That sounds nice. I responded, though I knew he was blatantly lying to me. What had I been doing all these years, taking care of Harry? After losing my husband at a young age, I worked non-stop as a hairstylist. It was all to raise Harry into a respectable person. When he expressed a desire to become an independent hairstylist, I fulfilled his wish without hesitation. Yet, Harry carelessly squandered the inheritance his father left, using it for his own pleasures. And even treating his wife and child cruelly. My expectations for Harry turned into profound disappointment.
What would you like as a souvenir? I'll bring you something nice.
Anything's fine. You're coming back next week, right? Safe and sound. Hey, Mom? You sound a bit off. Is something wrong? Mom? Harry seemed to sense something, but I ended the call without responding. I informed the building manager waiting outside of my plans and decided to take Yvonne and David back to my house. Then, I started making calls to every place I could think of. A week later, Harry called me, cheerfully announcing that he had just landed at the airport.
I'm back, Mom. And I've got souvenirs for you,
he said, pretending to be the caring son. But my heart was no longer deceived by his act. That's nice to hear. I replied in a flat tone, though Harry didn't seem to notice anything unusual. About an hour later, a taxi pulled up in front of the apartment. Harry, clearly having enjoyed his solo trip to Hawaii, with distinct tan lines from sunglasses around his eyes, unloaded a bunch of luggage from the trunk. He took out his keys, expecting to enter the apartment where his wife and son should be waiting. He must have thought that once he inserted and turned the key, the door would open immediately. However, no matter how many times he tried, the key wouldn't fit the lock.
What's going on here?
He exclaimed in frustration. I approached him quietly from behind and asked with a smile, "Did you enjoy your trip to Hawaii?" though my heart was boiling with anger.
Mom, you're here?
Harry said, relieved to see me, misunderstanding the situation. Listen, Mom. I just got back and tried to enter the house, but the key won't fit. It must be Yvonne's prank, punishing me for going on a trip alone. He tried to paint himself as the victim, blaming Yvonne. Leaving Yvonne, who just gave birth, and newborn David behind, what were you doing? I told you, I was in Hawaii with my family. Didn't you just say you went on the trip alone? I pointed out the contradiction. Harry was at a loss for words.
You really had the nerve to lie about taking a family trip to Hawaii? Yvonne was here, with the electricity cut off, shivering in the cold, holding David close to protect him. And to think, she cherished her long hair, and you just cut it off mercilessly. Don't you feel any remorse as a human being?
I guess I messed up there. But right now, I just want to get inside the house. It's freezing in Japan. Harry replied, rubbing his arms theatrically, showing no sign of remorse. The cold Yvonne and David endured is nothing compared to this. Plus, you no longer have a home here. I've already cancelled the lease on the apartment. It's time you find your own place to live.
Cancelled the lease? Why would you do something like that without asking me?
Harry protested, suddenly panicking. But the apartment was leased under my name, after all. I couldn't just stand outside and continue this conversation, so I took Harry to a nearby coffee shop to talk further. Harry sipped his coffee silently, probably not even tasting it. He kept glancing between me and his coffee with a pale face.
You were so strapped for cash that you couldn't pay the electric bill, yet you managed to go to Hawaii?
That's... Harry grimaced and finally began to spill his selfish reasoning. He admitted that right from the start of his business, he was showing off to friends and women he picked up at the salon, spending his father's inheritance on his antics. He knew such spending would quickly deplete any fortune. But after getting a taste of the power of money, he continued his lavish lifestyle even after the inheritance ran out, racking up debts to buy gifts and take trips. You're quite the big spender, aren't you? Especially for a failing business. Don't worry. I'm a professional hairstylist. Once I get serious, clients will come flooding in, and I'll be able to support my family. Harry replied with unfounded confidence. I looked at him coldly. Your salon? I've already sold it. All the equipment too. It's too late to get anything back. I shattered his baseless confidence.
That's a lie. Why would you do something like that?
Harry's face turned red as he slammed his hand on the table.
Oh? You were planning to continue with the salon? I thought you had abandoned it since you left everything to Yvonne. Besides, I bought the building and land in my name.
You have no right to complain now.
But I was just trying to attract customers. I had it all planned out.
Harry's eyes looked like those of a child about to burst into tears. If you're so confident in your skills, you should be able to start over from scratch. I said coldly, then left the coffee shop after placing money for the coffee on the table. A month passed. Yvonne and I avoided any contact with Harry, but unpleasant rumors inevitably reached my ears. After I pushed him away, Harry apparently ran to his friends begging for money. But they were the kind who gathered around him for his money. Naturally, nobody was willing to help a financially drained Harry. He even got reported to the police for stalking some of the women he picked up at his salon. Although he only received a stern warning from the police, the lack of support from his acquaintances hit him hard, and he completely disappeared from our lives. He's probably living alone now, in fear of harsh debt collectors. All this is the consequence of his own actions. My anger towards Harry isn't just about his reckless spending. What's unforgivable is how he neglected Yvonne and David, pushing them into hardship. And above all, cutting off Yvonne's long hair, which she had grown out for years for a noble cause. Thereby potentially robbing unknown children of a brighter future. As a fellow hairstylist, I could never forgive Harry's actions. It will take a long time for Harry to truly understand the emotional pain Yvonne has endured. Yvonne herself never speaks of her hurt, but it's clear she's not unscathed. She appears to be keeping her feelings bottled up, probably not wanting to worry me. Wanting to do something to help, I reached out to my hairstylist friends and had a special wig made for Yvonne.
It won't make up for my son's wrongs, but please use this. Thank you, Mom.
Yvonne said with a smile, though tears were streaming down her cheeks. Using my aching back as an excuse, I asked Yvonne to help out at the salon. She threw herself into the work, seemingly trying to forget her emotional scars.
Hello, David.
A regular greeted, and David in his cradle burst into giggles. Now, some customers even come to the salon just to see him. He's like a little mascot, a baby that brings in good fortune. Yvonne, regaining her strength both physically and emotionally, has started the process of divorcing Harry.
Seeing Yvonne smile makes us all feel like we've shed 20 years.
But it's true, Yvonne and David have brightened up the salon considerably. Attracted by Yvonne's cheerful atmosphere, more and more mothers with young children have become regulars.
Let's have a great day today. Hi, how are you? Now, the salon is filled with smiles again. In a quiet corner, David is peacefully sleeping, his cute little snores filling the air.
Hey, ugly.
Is that your kid? A defective product just like her mom.
These were the words thrown at me by my ex-husband, Sean, as he scrutinized me and my daughter, who was sitting in the wheelchair I was pushing, from head to toe, immediately upon our reunion after 13 years. I was about to retort with some foul language when Ken, my current husband, spoke up from behind me, "What's wrong with my daughter?" His deep baritone voice resonated so well that not only I, but also the people around us couldn't help but turn around. However, I might have been the only one to notice the chilly undertone in his voice. Looking back at Sean, I could see his face had turned pale. My name is Rika. I'm 35 years old. I'm a stay-at-home mom living with my 3-year-old daughter Natalie and my husband Ken, who is 3 years younger than me. The house we currently live in was originally built by Ken's parents. Right after Ken and I got married, my mother-in-law passed away suddenly from an illness, leaving her elderly husband living alone. We couldn't just leave my father-in-law by himself, so Ken's parents handed over the house they lived in to us and moved in with my father-in-law. However, one of the reasons, probably, was that they were worried about Ken's financial situation just after he had started his own business. They wanted us to live in their house without having to pay rent, which was a significant decision for us. I was overjoyed by my in-laws' kindness and, until Natalie was born, I used to visit my father-in-law's house every other day, helping with hospital visits and household chores. After Natalie was born, I slowed down a bit, but still made it a point to visit with Ken at least twice a month, helping out wherever we could or giving my in-laws a break to go relax at spa resort. My in-laws always expressed their gratitude, saying, "We're really thankful for all the help, especially during such a busy time with the baby, and Ken has indeed married a wonderful person." To me, no amount of effort could repay the kindness Ken's family, including his parents and twin sister, Sally, have shown me. They've saved my life not once but twice. Ken was marrying for the first time, but I had been through a failed marriage before. I met my first husband, Sean, when I moved to New York for university and started living in an apartment. We became friends as we moved in on the same day and shared information about nearby supermarkets, home improvement stores, and affordable restaurants. Sean attended a prestigious private university known for its stylish campus and media presence, quite different from my practical university. He was tall, handsome. He often said, "A lot of students at my university come from privileged backgrounds, making it feel claustrophobic for someone from the countryside like me. You and I are alike, it's easier because we don't have to put on airs." And so, he started to spend more time at my place, eventually leading to us living together like a couple. Back then, I couldn't believe I was dating a handsome guy like Sean and thought, I might not have the glamour of the female students on Sean's campus, but I can be a comforting presence. I ended up doing all the housework like cooking, cleaning, and laundry, which, in hindsight, was absurd. A man who seeks comfort right at the start of a relationship is hardly ever a good sign, as that comfort is purely self-serving. Because that comfort is just an abbreviation, but it is, in fact, the very egoism that makes it easy for him. But love is blind. I ignored Sean's selfishness, and when he said, "I want to quit my job because it's tough, but I can't afford to because I don't make much. My classes have gotten harder since I've advanced in my program," I suggested, "why don't we move into a slightly bigger apartment? Don't worry about the rent." So, we moved to a new apartment near our initial meeting place, and I ended up covering all the rent. Sean insisted on having 2 phone lines, one for him and one for me, claiming my dad got transferred to Europe for work around the same time I started high school, and my mom went with him. They're very conservative, and if they found out I was living with someone, they might stop sending money or even tell me to drop out. You wouldn't want that, and neither would your parents, even if we're planning to get married eventually. At the time, all I could think about was the prospect of marriage, not considering the implications of his request. This cohabitation put a significant financial burden on me. Since the apartment lease was in my name, I was responsible for not only the rent but also for utilities like electricity, gas, water, the landline phone bill, and internet charges, all of which were being withdrawn from my account. Initially, Sean had nobly offered, "Since you're covering the rent, I'll pay more towards the utilities." However, it wasn't long before he started saying, "Sorry, Rika. I'm short on cash again this month because of social obligations. With job hunting on the horizon, I can't afford to turn down invitations from friends in my seminar." And so, I ended up shouldering all the expenses. Before I knew it, I was also paying for groceries and even the beer Sean drank after his baths, with Sean's contribution being limited to the occasional delivery pizza when his friends came over to hang out. Moreover, whenever he invited seminar or club friends over, he'd tell me, "I haven't told them we're living together because it'd just lead to awkward teasing. You should stay away from the apartment for the day." Outside of university classes, all my time was consumed by part-time jobs and household chores, leaving me with no one to confide in, rant to, or seek refuge with, forcing me to spend nights at manga cafes or diners. The summers were tough, but waiting on a park swing in the cold early mornings for the time when I could return home, without enough money for warmth, I couldn't help but cry, wondering, what am I even doing with my life? As Sean and I reached our senior year and began job hunting in earnest, I finally snapped, accusing him of living like a leech. "You need to start contributing to our living expenses." Immediately, he switched to a soothing tone. "I'm so sorry, Rika. I've just been taking your kindness for granted. Please don't be mad at me." His attempt to appease me was blatant, but it only highlighted the imbalance in our relationship. The next day, Sean, unusually, came to pick me up from my part-time job. When we got back to the apartment, he had cleaned up the place and prepared a dinner he seemed to have gotten from a department store basement food hall, complete with a bouquet, wine, and even a cake. It was the first time I felt truly touched by Sean's thoughtfulness during our long relationship. He then presented me with a ring from a popular casual brand at the time, saying, "This is all I can afford right now, but someday I'll buy you a diamond worth 3 months of my salary." I remember blurting out a cliché about being the happiest I've ever been when he put the ring on my finger. But that was the only happy memory I had. Soon after, Sean said, "I'm torn between getting a job or studying abroad. But if things stay as they are, I'll just end up relying on you again, Rika. It's a critical juncture in my life, so I want to try doing things on my own for a while." And with that, he moved out to share an apartment with friends. Left suddenly on my own, I was anxious, but Sean left some of his belongings with me and still contacted me twice a day by email or phone, so I thought, I shouldn't mope around. I need to focus on my job search too. I managed to get an offer from my first choice company, a mid-sized trading firm, but around that time, I started receiving strange calls on the landline registered in Sean's name. Naturally, I'd hear the messages left on the answering machine, with ominous words like, "We'll be in trouble if you don't repay us by this week, and don't take us lightly." I quickly contacted Sean's cell, but he just brushed it off, saying, "It's nothing, don't worry about it." Then, letters began arriving in the mail, filled with words like payment reminder and final notice. When I confronted Sean more forcefully, he snapped, saying, "Stop nagging. I've been putting up with someone as ugly and defective as you this whole time, so the least you can do is pay this off as a thank you." After that, he stopped answering my calls. Deceived by his regular contact, I realized too late that I hadn't asked for Sean's new address. When I tried contacting his university, they refused to give me any information, saying, "We can't disclose that to unrelated individuals." Desperate for any clue, I opened some of the cardboard boxes Sean had left in the apartment. Inside were documents from several finance companies hinting at debts, old clothes with no resale value, and a used, outdated laptop. There was nothing that could lead me to Sean's parents' address or his current whereabouts, making me realize I was nothing more than a source of money to him. But things got worse when, not long after losing contact with Sean, 2 men in suits showed up at my apartment, informing me that as Sean's wife and guarantor for his debts, I was expected to repay them promptly. The additional blow at a time when I hadn't even recovered from the shock of being abandoned by Sean was enough to devastate me. It was Ken and his family who rescued me from this situation. That's why I've always wanted to do everything I can for my parents and Ken. However, as I was pushing my daughter Natalie's wheelchair through the mall, I had an unexpected reunion. That was with Sean, the man who had betrayed and abandoned me 13 years ago. He looked at me and Natalie rudely, then approached with an unpleasant smile. And the first thing he said was, "Hey, ugly. Is that your kid? A defective product just like her mom." I was about to lose my temper, not just at the insult to me but to my innocent daughter, when a man stepped in between Sean and me. It was Ken, my husband. "What's wrong with my daughter?" Ken asked, his voice carrying clearly. Passers-by stopped to see what was happening. But Sean, for some reason, turned pale and didn't retort. As Natalie and I looked back and forth between Sean and Ken, Sean, unable to withstand the surrounding gazes, snapped at Ken, "This is private. It's none of your business, right?" But Ken, unflustered, replied, "I'm involved because it concerns my family. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother speaking to someone like you." Then, turning to Natalie, he said with a smile, "Mommy and Daddy have some business to take care of. Auntie will be here soon to pick you up, so why don't you go to her house first?" Hearing that, I couldn't help but exclaim, "What?" However, Natalie, who is unusually composed for her age and not easily surprised, said, "Okay. Since it's a celebration, make sure you come early." Soon after, Ken's sister, Sally, arrived with her children, and Natalie left with them, leaving the scene behind. Then, Ken, losing the initial momentum and slightly stooping towards Sean, who seemed somewhat diminished by the confrontation, pressured with a half-smile, "Let's have an adult conversation, shall we? It's best we move somewhere else rather than providing a free show for the public." Sean, not particularly short but significantly overshadowed by Ken's near 6 feet 3 inches stature, and faced with Ken's unsmiling gaze, probably thought it better than being gawked at by onlookers and surprisingly agreed to Ken's suggestion to change locations. The three of them took a taxi and arrived at the building housing Ken's office. With the push of an elevator button and a glance at the tenant directory next to it, Sean realized they were headed to a law firm, which made his complexion turn pale again. But it was too late to run away, so he reluctantly joined them in the elevator. On his supposed day off, Ken appeared with a stern face, bringing his wife, me, and a guest, which surprised the office staff. However, by the time we were escorted to the back reception room, they had regained their composure. Watching Ken's profile, I too managed to calm my nerves. The only one who remained visibly restless and uneasy was Sean. Seeing Sean state, Ken, with a sly smile, placed a stack of documents on the table after asking a staff member to bring them and casually mentioned, "It's terrifying how coincidences work, isn't it? To think we'd meet the very person involved before showing this investigation report to the chairman." Sean's complexion grew even worse upon hearing this, but I had no idea what they were talking about. Noticing my confusion, Ken began to explain to both Sean and me. The chairman he mentioned was a major client of Ken's office, the current chairman of a machine tool manufacturing company. Recently, the chairman personally summoned Ken to the company's headquarters, where he was introduced to the chairman's youngest daughter, who had just returned from studying in the United States. The chairman had a special request. He wanted an investigation into a man's background to be kept confidential. "And there, in the sales department, was none other than you, right? Sean Smith? Well, you were using a different spelling for Sean back then," Ken continued with a grin, making Sean's face grow even paler. Ken went on to explain that the chairman's granddaughter, while studying in France, had formed a relationship with a man at the same graduate school, promising each other a future together. This man had dropped out of a university just before graduating and moved to France to enroll in a local university. After graduating, he worked for U.S. company's local branch but left, seeking further education in graduate school. The granddaughter, a smart woman, had fallen deeply in love with this man, who supported her through the homesickness after enrolling in a French university. Having completed her master's degree earlier than him, she returned to Japan with him and asked her grandfather, the chairman, to approve their marriage and to consider him for a position in the family-owned company. The chairman was completely unaware of this man's existence around his granddaughter in France. However, the executive director, the chairman's daughter, had met the man several times during business trips to France and had been introduced to his parents stationed there. The executive director thought it too sudden for her adult daughter to marry and immediately join the family business as a future executive. So, after a private discussion between the doting grandfather and the executive director, they discreetly commissioned Ken's law firm, which had a long-standing relationship with their family, to investigate Sean. Feeling a bad premonition, I asked, "Don't tell me, that man isn't Sean, is it?" But before Ken could answer, Sean snapped back, "What? It's a problem if it's me. We've been over for ages, and who I marry has nothing to do with you." Sure, Sean was a part of my past I'd rather forget, and I had no interest in his current affairs, but there was plenty I wanted to say to him out of spite.
Separated, yes. But right before that, you filed for our marriage without my consent, made me a guarantor for your debts, then disappeared.
I shouted, and Sean seemed taken aback for a moment but quickly smirked. "You say that, but you wanted to marry me back then. I just made your dream come true, and in return, you helped a bit with my debts." Pointing at Ken, he continued, "I was worried when I had to update my passport at the embassy. But when I checked back here, I was relieved to find I was single. I never thought someone as ugly and defective as you would have someone else willing to take you in, so I was worried you might be waiting for my return." Just as I was about to lose my temper again, Ken stepped in. "I thought you had been quiet because you were reflecting, but a scumbag will always be a scumbag," he remarked, then smoothly explained how our marriage was annulled, leaving Sean officially single. It turns out, when Sean disappeared and debt collectors came for me, Ken's father, my father-in-law, was the first to offer me advice. One of my part-time jobs was tutoring, and at that time, my student was Ken's twin sister, Sally, who has now become my sister-in-law. Sally was a bright kid but had started to skip school due to being ostracized by her classmates. Hired by her concerned parents, I learned that Sally was excluded for standing up for a friend who was also being ostracized. Trying to cheer her up, I not only helped with her studies but also listened to her problems, which endeared me to her parents and grandparents, who began treating me like family. Sally happened to be visiting with her mother to share the news of her recommended admission to the college she wished for, right when the debt collectors showed up at my apartment. Shocked by my exhausted state and furious to learn about the marriage registration done without my consent and being made a guarantor for debts, she immediately contacted her father and grandfather, who brought me to this law firm. From there, my father and grandfather mobilized all their resources to resolve the situation. They started by filing for annulment due to the unauthorized marriage registration and negotiating with the financial institutions about the invalidity of me being made a guarantor against my will. It was a tough battle, but given their expertise in this field, they managed to successfully resolve both issues, I was told. Facing a lawsuit for annulment and dealing with stubborn financial institutions was a tremendous effort, especially as Sean was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, overwhelmed by this sudden misfortune, the shock of being abandoned by Sean, and the turmoil that jeopardized my college graduation and employment offer, I worried about how I could ever afford the attorney's fees. That's when my grandfather-in-law offered me a job at this firm, where I worked diligently. I was hoping to repay them in some small way. Despite my efforts to pay the attorney's fees, the Bar Association's regulations only allowed me to cover the actual expenses with a little extra. Thanks to their efforts, the marriage was ultimately annulled, and I was also released from being Sean's guarantor for his debts.
So technically, you're not Rika's ex-husband. You're just a blemish on her life,
they told Sean. Still, Sean seemed unable to grasp the gravity of the situation, retorting, "Well, having a marriage history with such a woman would be boring anyway. And as for the debts, they're probably statute barred by now, so it doesn't matter." At that moment, Ken burst into laughter. Facing Sean's confused reaction, Ken retorted, "The statute of limitations hasn't kicked in. I believe you'll be seeing some collection efforts starting this coming week." Sean might have thought that after 13 years, his debts were time-barred, but thanks to my grandfather-in-law, I was removed as a guarantor. The financial institution, unable to track down Sean, devised a plan and transferred Sean's debt to a debt collection agency they had ties with. In cases like Sean's, where repayment was dodged or delayed, making the bad debt unrecoverable, financial institutions often sell these debts to debt collection agencies. These agencies, then, are professionals in collections, employing all legal means possible, thanks to their extensive knowledge of the law. The agency that purchased Sean's debt was no exception, and after proceeding with various legal steps, a court judgment initiated by the collection company has reset the statute of limitations for another 10 years, making the debt fully valid today. Moreover, the total debt, now inflated with accrued late fees and legal costs, has skyrocketed to several times the original amount. Hearing this, Sean momentarily looked disheartened but then defiantly claimed, "Ah, such trivial money. Once I marry into that company's granddaughter's family and land a job there, it'll all be manageable." Such was Sean's shallow thinking. He probably assumed that marrying into the family as planned and securing an executive position at his father-in-law's company would make the debt repayment seem trivial. However, when Ken reminded him, "Do you remember what I mentioned earlier? Who had hired me to investigate you?" Sean's face turned completely pale. The truth is, Ken is Sally's twin brother. While I had little interaction with Ken when I tutored Sally, only exchanging greetings, Ken had developed an interest in me after hearing Sally sing my praises like a sister. Eventually, as I unexpectedly started working at the office and Ken, having passed the bar exam during his university years, began working there too, he proposed to me, considering marriage. Despite my past and owing much to my grandfather-in-law and his family, I initially refused, feeling it was improper. Yet, Ken revealed he had known about Sean all along and still wished to marry me, with the full support of his parents, grandparents, and Sally. By then, my parents, fully aware of my circumstances, also blessed our union, leading to a happy marriage with Ken. Unlike me, who wanted to seal away the past, Ken had harbored a desire for revenge against Sean for years. The request from the chairman was initially thought to be a coincidence of names, but further investigation confirmed that the Sean Smith, who was the chairman's daughter's boyfriend, was indeed the same Sean Smith who had discarded me like trash. Based on that, Ken was about to submit the report first thing next week.
You might have gotten away with it using different spelling overseas, but in here, it doesn't work that way. I heard the young lady noticed the difference in spelling when she saw your driver's license. You claimed it was because a fortune teller told you this version brought better luck, but in reality, you've been dodging responsibilities left and right, haven't you? After all, Sean is a very common name in the US, so you were probably planning to claim identity confusion if anything went wrong. Ken said, admonishing Sean for thinking such shallow tricks would work on a lawyer. He revealed that he had already scanned and emailed the report to the chairman and his granddaughter. Adding to that, Ken said, since then, we've occasionally received inquiries from that financial institution, checking if they had located you. I've also informed them about your situation. Sean, suddenly dropping to his knees, begged, please somehow convince the chairman and the others that it was all a mistake. But Ken, with a sarcastic tone, questioned, why should I, a lawyer, tell such blatant lies to a client, especially when you've insulted my young daughter, who is in a wheelchair because of an injury, calling her ugly and defective. The truth is, Natalie's injury happened while she was on her way to violin practice. I took my eyes off her for just a moment, and she was knocked over by a high school student distracted by their phone. Since then, Natalie has been somewhat withdrawn, worrying Sally and her kids, who, upon learning that Natalie won a prize in an art competition, suggested, let's celebrate her achievement. Today was supposed to be for that celebration, but Sean's unexpected appearance turned it into a complete disaster. Ken, utterly doting on his daughter, was undoubtedly furious not just because of Sean's past actions but also because of the vile words directed at Natalie. Even as Ken coldly dismissed him, Sean, without any shame, continued to cry out loudly, pleading, please. The future of a man's life is at stake here. Are you going to ruin it? But Ken responded, ruin someone's life? Which right do you have to say such a thing? What you tried to do to Rika and the chairman's granddaughter was exactly the act of ruining someone's life. It's like the saying, curse others and you dig two graves. A boomerang that came right back at you. You should accept it gracefully. When Sean still tried to cling to him, Ken brushed off his arm and said, the exit is that way, calling the building's security to escort Sean out with a flick of his hand. As Sean's cries and resentments faded away, Ken and I exchanged smiles.
Later on, Sean rushed to his girlfriend, the chairman's granddaughter, and made excuses, but she, already harboring suspicions, was outraged by the revelation of the truth and refused to see him again, effectively giving him the boot. However, the chairman and the executive director, upset over their beloved daughter and granddaughter being hurt, took further action. Sean, attempting to reconcile and bombarding her with messages and emails, was reported to the police for suspicion of being a fraudster trying to marry and infiltrate the company with a fake resume. While it didn't escalate to a criminal case, a warning was issued for the stalking. Sean, persistent in continuing his harassment, was eventually arrested and prosecuted. Though he received a suspended sentence with probation instead of jail time, the conviction meant he could find employment nowhere, not just outside of Tokyo but across the entire country, despite superficially returning to his normal life. Finding himself in a desperate situation, Sean once again tried to go to America, hoping to find employment there, but with a criminal record, he struggled to obtain a visa and had to give up on that plan. Moreover, after learning everything from the chairman and the police, his parents disowned him, leaving Sean truly alone. Facing unavoidable debt repayment, he tried to find odd jobs, but, without a smartphone due to being blacklisted, an expired driver's license, and no fixed address, decent work was impossible to come by. I heard through the grapevine that he ended up working for a shady handyman service introduced by the debt collectors, living in a dormitory with no privacy and working from dawn till dusk. But I decided to forget about it as soon as I heard, as it had nothing to do with me. On the other hand, Ken and I moved from our suburban house to a condo near the private elementary school Natalie plans to attend, once her injury had healed. Natalie, who has been averse to taking the train since the accident, liked the bus accessibility and the view from our high-rise apartment, seeming happier every day. The previous house was a remodeled version of Ken's parents' home, so when Ken suggested selling it to move, I worried about what his parents would think. However, they, enjoying their second life in a warm seaside town, told us, the happiness of our son, his wife, and our granddaughter is what matters most. Don't worry about us. They actually encouraged us to go ahead with the move. Being closer to my workplace means more time spent with the family than before. It was a good decision, Ken, enjoying the new life as much as Natalie, said. Watching them, I've been thinking about trying something new myself. Ariana, who once stole my fiancé, Jake, only to dump him and then vanished without paying the compensation she owed my parents for the trouble she caused. Now, she stands before us, making snide remarks. Your husband is quite older, isn't he? What does he do for a living? My husband is a doctor. Compared to him, your husband looks poor. He's quite muscular. Does he, by any chance, work on a construction site? Just as I was about to retort, my husband, Michael, stopped me. I do physical work, yes. Speaking of doctors, working here means he's employed at the Blue Island General Hospital? Yes. He's a surgeon. Really? He's one of my subordinates, though? You mean William from the Blue Island General Hospital, right? I believe his specialty is plastic surgery. Huh? Yes? Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm the chief of surgery at the General Hospital, my name's Michael. Shocked by the encounter with Ariana, I burst into tears as soon as we got into the car to go home. Michael then asked me, You've been thinking about something, haven't you? Tell me, how do you want to deal with her from now on? Deal with her? That's impossible, obviously. Just thinking about it makes me feel suffocated. There was a time when just thinking about Ariana would make me hyperventilate. Yeah, I understand that you really don't want to be near that woman. That's why I have a plan. A plan? Yes, a way to ensure that a woman never appears before you again. My name is Maria. I'm a 32-year-old housewife. Currently, I live a peaceful and enjoyable life with my husband, Michael, who is 12 years older than me, and our 3-year-old son. Michael is extremely busy with his work, which he takes great pride in. I find fulfillment in supporting him at home. It might be rare these days to dedicate oneself to protecting the home for a husband who works outside. That's what some might say. Even my parents have mentioned it. Now, I have a truly happy family. But getting here wasn't without its hardships. That's because I was betrayed by someone I thought was my best friend. Ariana, who I met in college within the same department, was a friend. No, I thought of her as my best friend for 4 years, doing everything together. Coming to a college in the city, I was a bit intimidated, but Ariana reached out to me. She was bright, flashy, and above all, active, which surprised me in many ways, but I followed her nonetheless. For me, who had been modest and serious until high school, she was someone who opened up a new world. And our relationship continued even after we graduated. At that time, we both found jobs in companies in the city. Whenever we had time, we often went out to eat. Eventually, I met someone too. Jake, a salesperson from a manufacturer that did business with the trading company where I worked. As an office worker, I started getting asked out by him, and eventually, we started dating. Honestly, having hardly dated men before, I was over the moon. Everything went smoothly, and after a year of dating, we got engaged when I was 26. I probably got carried away at that time. You haven't been hanging out much lately, have you? Ariana would sometimes say. Well, that's true. I don't have multiple bodies. Naturally, I started spending more of my weekends with Jake. Are you keeping secrets from me?
Not really hiding anything.
Ariana, for her part, had never introduced me to anyone she was dating. So, I thought friendships and romantic relationships were different. Since we were planning our wedding, it was natural that my time was increasingly taken up by him. I didn't tell Ariana about it, not because I wanted to surprise her. But I won't deny there was also a feeling of embarrassment. Introducing him to Ariana, who could easily chat up and hang out with any guy, felt daunting. Back then, I was afraid of how Jake would appear in Ariana's eyes. Yet, as the wedding approached, I thought it was finally okay to tell her. Hey, there's someone I want you to meet, I said as I introduced Jake to Ariana.
Oh my! Maria, keeping secrets from your best friend? That's so like you.
Ariana patted my back with a beaming smile. But that turned out to be a mistake. When the wedding reservation and preparations were nearly finalized, Jake suddenly came to my parents' house and said,
I'm sorry. I can't marry you.
When I asked why, he said, Ariana is pregnant. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying at first. After that, it was a mess. Was Ariana really pregnant? At that point, it didn't matter anymore. He called off the engagement when the wedding was just around the corner.
I'm so sorry.
In my stunned silence, my dad, half furious, berated and even hit him while he was apologizing. It could have gotten worse if my mom hadn't stopped him. The wedding was canceled. While I was incapable of doing anything, my outraged parents demanded he pay the full cancellation fee and compensation for what he did to their only daughter. They also demanded compensation from Ariana. He admitted his fault and seemed to pay what he owed, apologizing sincerely. I say seemed because my memory of that time isn't very clear. I was in shock, likely in denial about reality. So, I found out later that Ariana had skipped town without apologizing or paying any compensation. It turns out she wasn't actually pregnant, according to a letter she left behind. The lie and her fleeing devastated me again. What was she thinking? Ariana's parents were furious as well. When this rumor spread among our college friends, I heard another shocking thing.
I didn't say anything because you didn't notice, but Ariana used to go after every guy you liked, one after another.
This was news to me.
Why would she do that?
I don't know.
Even though Ariana was popular on her own, every time someone showed interest in you, she ended up making them date her instead. Maybe she was jealous when guys approached you instead of her? But we were best friends.
Were you, though? I was shocked.
Back then, it seemed more like you were following Ariana around, and everyone thought she saw you that way too.
That hit me hard. not just realizing Ariana's true thoughts, but also that I had been completely oblivious to it, and my lack of judgment when it came to men. Adding to the shock, the stares at work labeled me as the woman who got jilted right before her wedding, and I finally broke down. I quit my job and spent some time recuperating at my parents' house. Then, settled down, I got a new job at 28 and started matchmaking on my parents' advice, not trusting my own judgment anymore. I felt more secure with being introduced by worried relatives. Among them, I met Michael, a man 12 years my senior. He was too busy with work to even think about women, and by the time he realized, he was already this age. At 40, his surroundings got worried and arranged a matchmaking for him. I decided to marry him because he was upfront about possibly neglecting family due to his work, which I saw as honesty. Considering my past failure, we only informed close family and friends about our wedding. The following year, I got pregnant and planned to take a break from work, but then Michael got headhunted by another company in a different city. I felt bad for leaving my relatively new job, but everyone was kind and saw me off. And so, our new life as three began in a new place.
What? Could it be Maria?
One day, by sheer coincidence, Ariana appeared right in front of me. That day, the three of us had gone to the shopping mall. Our target for the day was the home improvement tools. Since moving here, we've been gradually working on our new home's interior ourselves. DIY has always been a hobby of mine. Michael's new job is a higher position than before, and it comes with less irregular hours. So, now he sometimes helps me with shopping for heavy items. Well, right now, he's carrying our son, Sean, on his shoulders, but what are the odds in this mall?
Ariana? Long time no see. Wow, you got married. Yeah, but Ariana, you're in this town?
Yep. Moved here for my husband's job. Wow, so this is your current husband? Ariana looked at us over. Then to Michael, she snidely said, quite older, isn't he? Michael casually responded, yeah, got a bit too caught up in work. Maria's friend, right? Yes, Ariana. And you're all about work, huh? What do you do?
Ariana, isn't that a bit abrupt?
Oh, Maria, are you still mad about it?
It's not that.
My husband's a doctor. Compared to him, your husband looks poor. He's got quite the muscles, though. Does he, by any chance, work in construction? Judging by appearances alone.
That way of speaking.
But before I could argue back, Michael stopped me. I do. Speaking of doctors, does he work at Blue Island General Hospital? Yes. He's a surgeon. Really? He's one of my subordinates, though? Huh? You mean William from Blue Island General Hospital, right? Yeah. Oh, right. Sorry for the late introduction. I'm the chief of surgery at the hospital, Michael.
Michael, as in the one who was eagerly headhunted last year?
What a coincidence. Michael smiled gently.
Yes.
Suddenly, Ariana's attitude changed. Thinking back, this had happened before. I just hadn't noticed.
Oh, my apologies. I didn't realize it because of your casual attire.
No worries, casual clothes are just that. I clenched the hem of Michael's work clothes he was wearing at the time. What's wrong, Maria?
Let's head back.
Are you sure? She's an old friend, right?
Yeah.
There's so much I want to talk about.
Let's go.
Okay then. Sorry, maybe some other time.
Sure, love to.
Ariana's cheerful voice irked me. What's wrong? You look pale, and your pulse is racing. While saying this, we went back to the car, and as Michael put Sean in his child seat, he checked my temperature and pulse.
No more, I never want to see Ariana again. I don't want to.
He gently patted my trembling shoulder. If you don't want to see her, that's fine, but can you tell me why later? I just nodded silently. That night, after putting Sean to bed, I told Michael everything that had happened. I see, so that's it.
I knew you had been cheated on by your fiancé right before the wedding, but I didn't know she was the woman.
You knew?
I figured something sad had happened.
I nodded silently, several times.
Yes. It's not just that. It's always been.
Tears of frustration won't stop falling from my eyes. It's always like this. I realize something after it happens. I've always hated Ariana.
If that's the case, she's really toxic. And it seems like she has an unhealthy obsession with you. With me?
Yeah. Isn't it obvious?
Luring away anyone who gets close to you only to discard them.
What does she think of these men to her, huh?
That's true, but even with your former fiancé, it turns out he's not married now, if he was supposed to be with William.
That's indeed the case.
And about William, or rather.
Michael suddenly looked thoughtful.
What's wrong? Ariana's husband is. I was just thinking.
Tell me, Maria, how do you want to deal with her going forward?
Deal with her? That's impossible, obviously.
Just thinking about it makes me feel suffocated. There was a time when just thinking about Ariana would make me hyperventilate.
It's okay, it's okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I understand you really don't want to be near that woman. That's why I have a plan. A plan? Yes, a way to ensure that a woman never appears before you again.
And then, Michael smiled gently again. Ah, that's right, this man, though he seems calm, takes action when it's necessary. 2 weeks later. In the evening, while preparing dinner and waiting for Michael to come home, Mom, Grandpa and Grandma. Suddenly, Sean pointed out the window. Right after that, the doorbell rang. Indeed. It was my parents. I hurried to welcome them in. Their home is several states away. It takes hours by car. What's going on?
Yeah, Michael called us. He said it was urgent, so we're here to watch the house. House sitting? Haven't you heard?
I quickly sent a message to Michael. Immediately, I received a reply, so your parents have arrived. Come here now. And bring your earphones, along with the URL of a certain restaurant.
I don't know what's going on, but it looks like I have to go out now. Unusual for Michael. I was in the middle of cooking dinner. That's okay, we'll finish up. Let's make it our dinner.
Wondering what was going on, I started to get ready to leave.
By the way, Maria, we saw that girl's parents at the rest area on the way here.
My mom mentioned, as if remembering something.
That girl?
That girl.
Ah, just thinking about it irks me, that. Ariana? I don't even want to say her name. But what could it be about?
I hadn't told my parents that Ariana was living in this area. Given how down I was at that time, my mom's worry was tremendous. And her tirade against Ariana's parents was fierce. Honestly, I never thought my mom could get so angry. Because of that past, I thought mentioning Ariana over the phone would complicate things.
I'll be going then.
I got into the car and headed to the restaurant Michael had specified. It was a cozy, nice-looking restaurant. According to the restaurant's website in the URL, the dinner seemed moderately priced. I wondered if Michael was waiting here for me. As I got out of the car, noticing a few other vehicles parked as the evening gradually darkened. Another message popped up on my phone.
Put on your earphones and come inside.
Curious, I entered the restaurant where a waiter guided me to a two-person table. A man sat alone at the next table over. A drink in front of him, elbows on the table, hands covering his mouth. Exuding an unapproachable aura with his sunglasses and all-black attire. I'm waiting for someone. I began to tell the waiter to bring water and suggested the menu. He subtly gestured towards a seat across the room. There was Michael, seated opposite a woman, with several dishes that seemed like an early dinner laid out on the table. I nodded to the waiter and ordered a light meal that wouldn't seem out of place on the table. At that moment, my phone vibrated inside my bag. It was a message from Michael. Hurriedly, I attached the earphones to my phone and put them in my ears. Then I heard it. No, William is a good doctor. He specializes in plastic surgery.
But you're even more remarkable, isn't that right?
The woman's voice I heard, her back to me, was Ariana's. Startled, I switched my phone to record mode. Michael was intentionally letting me listen.
Since then, I've asked William a bit about you.
Oh, is that so?
I was amazed. After all, you've handled so many difficult surgeries nationally, haven't you? Thousands over 10 years, I heard?
Well, it's my job.
Amazing.
Ariana's tone had completely changed from our last encounter. Still, you've done quite the research.
Actually, I heard it from William when I mentioned running into you the other day.
Then, the man in black slightly lifted his hips before sitting back down. Glancing over, I noticed he too was wearing earphones. It must have been a surprise, suddenly reuniting with an old friend.
Yes, but meeting you was the highlight.
Shouldn't an old friend be more important?
No, I felt bad for speaking so dismissively of you before. I wanted to apologize.
Ariana continued in a tone that sounded almost like she was biting her tongue. I hadn't known. She never spoke like this when she was with me during our student days. So, this was how she acted around men. And thus, my former fiancé too.
But are you satisfied with your marriage to Maria?
I am, but why do you ask?
Isn't it boring with Maria?
Why would you say that? Because she was ditched by her fiancé before, you know. Maria is a good wife, more than I deserve. But she's plain, isn't she? What are you trying to say?
Actually, since our conversation the other day, I've fallen for your calm demeanor and presence. I think I could be much more for you than Maria.
The man in black's hands trembled visibly on the table. So, this was his play. Oh, for me? What do you mean by that?
Because you're invited to parties and such, right? With a plain wife like Maria, wouldn't you be embarrassed? In such places, you need someone more radiant, like me.
So you think you wouldn't embarrass me?
Yes.
So, you're suggesting you'd leave William for me?
No, that sounds terrible when you put it like that.
Then what do you mean? I'm a bit slow on the uptake, you see.
Ah, come on. Do you really make a woman say it? I told you, I fell for you.
William is a promising man. Not an old man like me.
Age doesn't matter. Actually, I'm disappointed in him.
That's when it happened. The man in black started to stand up. I hurriedly approached him. A man dressed all in black, probably this must be William. I silently stared at his face and showed him my earphones and the connected smartphone. William sat down again, as if realizing something. I needed to hear something more definitive. Disappointment. What does that mean? You mean coming home late every day? If that's the case, it's because of work. Unfortunately, patients don't wait.
No, it's not about him coming home late or anything like that.
Then what is it?
It's his salary.
Given his age and career, it's normal. Young professionals are like that.
But he's a doctor, right?
So?
I mean, if your partner is a doctor, you'd expect an income over $200,000, right?
I believe he's making around $140,000 to $150,000 now.
When we got married, it was less, and I was disappointed compared to what I had expected. Moreover, he goes to conferences and stuff, but he never takes me with him. So what if I were in that situation?
So?
It's not about the money. Haven't I told you several times? It was love at first sight.
What do you mean?
I want you to date me.
At that moment, William finally stood up. I tried to stop him, but it was probably too late. He stood behind Ariana, who was sitting across the table. I hurried after him. Then, Michael smiled faintly.
Ariana, is what you just said true?
Behind an oblivious Ariana, William spoke in a low voice. Ariana literally jumped in surprise when she turned around. What? You?
And Maria?
What are you two doing?
Don't tell me you're cheating? See, when you have something to hide, you end up saying things like that.
Michael said calmly to Ariana.
I heard your conversation.
So you've always thought of me like that, huh?
What do you mean, like that?
Here you are. I then confronted Ariana with the recording of our conversation.
What's this?
Michael took out 2 smartphones from his bag. One was connected to me, and the other must have been connected to William.
Do you even know what it means to become a fully fledged doctor? What's this all of a sudden? We spent years in college, then years before becoming regular doctors. I had just become a regular doctor when I met you. What?
Ariana started counting on her fingers suddenly.
So, I was just a newbie. But, you said you were a doctor at the mixer.
I am a doctor.
And at that time, I was dragged there by a high school buddy. I thought it was too early to marry, but you were the one who aggressively pursued me. Plus, I was earning more than my peers in corporate jobs. It was you who assumed I made more.
Indeed. Doctors are well paid, but not until they're fully established. And whether they own a practice, where they work, their employment status, and age can all affect their income. And it's true that doctors have fewer chances to marry.
It was a rare outing because I'm still a busy newbie, which is why I initially declined. Yes, that's true. It might sound like an excuse, but I wanted to work in rural healthcare. I needed to build up my experience in the field to be as versatile as possible. Yet, whenever I mentioned this, you would hysterically scream. But I don't want to go to the countryside. Even though I said it pays better, you didn't want to hear it. And it's not just that. You said you'd be a housewife to support me, but you don't do any housework. What?
I was surprised at that.
But housework isn't just for women nowadays.
That's if both are working. I chimed in.
In today's world, if you decide to be a stay-at-home wife, you really need to manage all household duties perfectly, so your husband doesn't have to worry about anything. Maria! Even you're saying that. But, are you managing all that, along with your social obligations? You seem to be misunderstanding something.
Michael sighed deeply.
You clearly have the wrong image of a doctor's wife.
Indeed. That's more like the image of a housewife from the past.
The glamorous life you imagine doesn't exist. I'm always watching the clock for his uncertain return time, managing childcare, and ensuring he has the stamina to handle surgeries lasting 10+ hours by planning nutritious meals.
Oh, I see.
William, have you been thinking I'm inattentive because I frequently seem to overlook things? Maybe you haven't been getting enough sleep at home?
Yes.
Well, I used to cook and do household chores on my own, but even so, my sleep hours have been significantly reduced because he keeps bothering me whenever he's home, making it hard to find time to study. Study? Of course. It's only natural to constantly acquire new knowledge for our patients. So, Maria, you're studying too? At this age?
Of course.
I'd be in trouble if I couldn't respond to his sudden calls. If it were a marriage between doctors, things like household chores and secretarial tasks would probably be outsourced. But I'm just an ordinary person, so I do what I can to support Michael, for his sake, the hospitals, and the patients. And I want to show our son a model of diligent work. How arrogant!
Say what you will.
I'm not the person I used to be.
That's right. Watching Ariana directly trying to charm Michael stirred a different kind of anger in me, not the fear I had felt before. Ariana, unable to counter my arguments, remained silent, possibly out of frustration. Then, William interjected firmly.
Ariana, I've decided to leave you. We're getting a divorce. What? What are you talking about? Being with you, I can't become the doctor I aim to be. And let me ask again, are you willing to follow me to rural areas? No, I can't go to such places.
I see.
But I want to go. That's why I can no longer be swayed by you.
Ariana's face froze.
You can't be serious about leaving me.
Suddenly, Ariana turned to me.
It's all because I met you again, Maria. Why did you have to come here? If only we hadn't met.
So, you're saying you wouldn't have thought about taking my husband if we hadn't met? You haven't changed at all since college.
What? How dare you?
Watching her, I began to feel pity for Ariana rather than fear. Why have you always taken and then discarded men who were interested in me or my boyfriends?
Because I hated you, the plain good girl.
But Ariana, hating me doesn't justify the effort you've put in. Like with Jake, you ended up running away from home. That's right. Ariana's actions were strange. If she hated me, she could have ignored me or bullied me directly. Yet, she took men away from me and discarded them, making it visible to our friends. And she even took my fiancé and demanded alimony. Ariana, could it be that you actually liked me a lot?
What?
She opened her eyes wide in disbelief. Was it my imagination, or did her neck veins bulge visibly when she got angry? It's said that veins bulge when one is angry. Apart from Jake, I hardly noticed. And the men who switched to you because of Ariana's tricks were not worth much anyway. In the end, it worked out in my favor, didn't it?
No, that's not true.
Even if I had married Jake, he might have cheated on me. So, Ariana, were you actually saving me from unhappiness?
What?
Ariana's gaze wandered. Didn't you realize?
That can't be.
I'm sorry, but I'll forget about you from now on.
No, that's a lie.
As she said that, Ariana suddenly collapsed in front of us, clutching her chest.
Doctor!
William looked at Michael with a serious expression.
Call an ambulance, quick! Right away!
Soon after explaining the situation to the ambulance, Michael and William went with it. Indeed, Michael specializes in cardiac surgery. He probably won't be coming home today. As I sighed deeply, the waiter brought our order. Thank you. Sorry for the commotion. No worries, this place was booked exclusively for you by Michael today. Wow. He had arranged even that. Truly, when he decides to do something, he does it right, I thought with a smile. Later at the hospital, there was another commotion. According to Michael's plan, Ariana's parents were supposed to come storming in. Shockingly, Ariana had only reported her marriage but had not introduced William to her parents. Perhaps the timing had prevented travel out of state. But that time had passed. Michael, through William, had contacted Ariana's parents for two reasons. One was the potential for further issues with men. The other was because he had noticed something off about Ariana's health. He had been suspicious of the way the veins on the right side of her neck bulged since their first meeting. As it turned out, Ariana did have a heart condition. She needed some hospital stay, but her life was not in danger due to the timely intervention. Her parents, having rushed over, decided to take Ariana home. Between the divorce, the sudden discovery of her illness, and being called out by me, Ariana was quite shaken.
I don't want to go back home.
Ariana resisted her parents, but you need to pay back the alimony we fronted, her father said angrily, and weakened by her condition, Ariana couldn't respond. The divorce led to mediation, where William's misuse of funds was also brought up, further increasing the amount her parents had to cover. Dragged back home, Ariana was now forced to work within their sight to repay them, a tough situation given her free-spirited nature. Caring for her health while being watched by her parents, and chased by serious work every day, for the free-spirited Ariana, that must be an unbearable ordeal. Look, a message from William. It's the weekend. Michael took a half-day off work, so the three of us went to a park with a wide grassy area for the first time in a while. Despite the chilly days continuing, Sean, dressed warmly, was running around on the grass, laughing. Is he all right? As we sat on a bench with a view of Sean, we took turns looking at an email. Check out this photo. The photo showed William smiling and participating in a local festival. A stark contrast to his previously worried expression. That's great. You won't have to be troubled by the past anymore. That's absolutely true. Half of the fear I had was self-generated. And facing Ariana seemed to have lifted some kind of curse.
Daddy!
Sean waved at us enthusiastically. "All right, let's catch him," said Michael as he started running. And I watched the two of them, guarding this moment. Now and in the future too.